Trapped in a cold, dimly lit jail cell, her wrists bruised from tight handcuffs, Maya Thompson's heart pounded with desperation. Why had it come to this? She clutched the phone, her trembling fingers dialing the one number she'd sworn never to use unless her life was on the line, a number tied to her brother, Darius Thompson. "I'm coming!" His voice boomed through the receiver, steady and fierce, igniting a flicker of hope in her chest. Sheriff Cole Mercer, a man who ruled Westbrook with an iron fist, had built his empire on terror, false arrests, planted drugs, shattered lives. His badge made him untouchable, his precinct a fortress of corruption, until he made the grave mistake of targeting the sister of the most lethal Delta Force commander in U.S. history. Darius, a shadow moving through Westbrook's dark streets, was now dismantling Mercer's rotten system with the same deadly precision he'd once used against America's enemies. Some men wield power like a weapon, others, like Darius, know exactly how to rip it away. It was late, the fluorescent lights of the quick-stop gas station casting eerie shadows across Maya's weary face as she pulled her battered Honda Civic into the last open pump. The dashboard clock blinked 11:37 p.m., a cruel reminder of how long her day had been. Exhausted, she rolled her shoulders, trying to ease the knots from a grueling 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital. Her faded scrubs still clung to the sharp antiseptic scent of the intensive care unit. "Mom, can I grab something to eat?" Elijah's sleepy voice drifted from the back seat. At 13, he was all gangly limbs and soulful eyes, far too mature for his years.
"I'm starving."
Maya caught his gaze in the rearview mirror, her tired smile masking the ache in her heart. "Sure, baby, but make it quick, okay? We both need to crash at home." The cool night air brushed her skin as she stepped out to pump gas, her mind racing with thoughts of a better tomorrow. Watching Elijah shuffle toward the convenience store, his oversized basketball sneakers scraping the cracked concrete, Maya felt a pang of guilt stab her chest. Another night he'd spent hunched over homework in the hospital break room while she worked a double shift. How could she keep doing this to him? She vowed silently that one day, somehow, life would be kinder to them both. But then, a police cruiser's headlights flooded her car in a harsh white glow, snapping her back to reality. Her stomach twisted as the vehicle idled ominously behind her. Living in Westbrook as a black woman, Maya knew all too well that a late-night stop at a gas station in this mostly white neighborhood could spell trouble. Why did her gut scream danger? Two officers stepped out, their boots heavy on the pavement. The taller one, with a buzz cut and a uniform stretched tight over his broad shoulders, swaggered toward her with menace. His nameplate glinted, Tate. The shorter officer, Wilkins, prowled around her car like a predator, his hand hovering near his holster. "Evening, ma'am," Deputy Logan Tate drawled, his voice laced with fake courtesy that sent chills down her spine. "That your vehicle?" Maya nodded, her movements slow and careful, every instinct screaming to stay calm. "Yes, sir. Is something wrong?" Wilkins swept his flashlight over her car, pausing on the dented rear bumper and peeling paint. "Matches the description of a stolen vehicle reported earlier tonight," he said coldly. Maya's heart lurched. "Stolen? There's got to be a mistake. I've owned this car for 5 years. I have all the paperwork." "I'm gonna need your license, registration, and proof of ownership right now," Tate barked, cutting her off, his hand twitching near his gun. Was he looking for an excuse to escalate? "Of course," Maya replied, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "My purse is in the car. May I reach for it?" Tate's eyes narrowed, his glare piercing. Slowly. As she leaned into the car, her eyes caught Elijah returning from the store, a bag of chips and a soda in his hands. His face paled at the sight of the officers. "Mom!" His voice cracked, raw with fear. "It's okay, Elijah." Maya called, though her trembling voice betrayed her panic. "The officers just need my registration. Everything's fine." But was it? Wilkins spun toward Elijah, his expression darkening. "Stay right where you are, kid." Maya handed over her wallet and registration, her hands shaking as she passed them to Tate. "Here you go, sir. Everything's in order." Tate barely glanced at the documents before tossing them to Wilkins. "This doesn't prove anything. Could all be falsified," he sneered. Confusion and terror swirled in Maya's chest. What was happening? "No, those are real," she insisted, her voice rising. "Step away from the vehicle." Tate ordered, his tone now sharp as a blade. "Mom!" Elijah cried, dropping his snacks and fumbling for his phone, his fingers frantically activating the camera. Wilkins zeroed in on him instantly. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he roared, storming toward Elijah, his face twisted with rage. "Leave him alone." Maya shouted, stepping forward, her maternal instinct overriding her fear. "He's just a kid." Tate seized Maya's arm, yanking it behind her back with brutal force. "I said step away from the vehicle," he snarled. "You're hurting me." Maya gasped, tears welling in her eyes as pain shot through her arm. Meanwhile, Wilkins reached Elijah, snatching the phone from his hands. "Filming police officers? That's obstruction of justice, kid." "No, it's not." Elijah protested, his voice breaking with defiance. "It's my right." Wilkins sneered, then deliberately dropped the phone, grinding it under his boot with a sickening crunch. "Oops." A small crowd gathered at the pumps, their murmurs growing louder. A middle-aged white woman stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Excuse me, officers, is this really necessary? She was just getting gas." "Ma'am, stay back. This is police business." Wilkins barked. "Anyone interfering gets arrested for obstruction." Another bystander, a young black man in a crisp business suit, pulled out his phone, recording the scene. Wilkins pointed at him, his voice menacing. "You want to spend the night in lockup too?" The man hesitated but kept filming. "This isn't right," he said firmly. "Last warning." Wilkins growled, advancing toward him. The man lowered his phone reluctantly but kept it in hand, refusing to back down completely. Tate, meanwhile, had Maya pinned against her car, his hands roughly patting her down. "What's in your pockets? Weapons? Drugs?" he demanded. "Nothing." Maya cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "I'm a nurse. I just got off my shift." "Sure you are," Tate scoffed, "and I'm the Queen of England." How could they twist her reality like this? Maya fought to stay composed. "Please, my son's watching. Just check my ID. I work at Memorial." "Stop resisting." Tate roared, though Maya was utterly still, her body rigid with fear. "I'm not," before she could finish, Tate grabbed her wrists, snapping handcuffs on so tightly they bit into her skin. He spun her around, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and menacing. "You people never learn, do you?" The blatant racism in his words struck Maya like a slap, stealing her breath. "What did I do wrong? Just tell me what I'm being arrested for," she pleaded, her voice shaking. Instead of answering, Tate clamped down on her arm, dragging her toward the cruiser. Maya glanced back, her heart breaking at the sight of Elijah, frozen in shock, tears streaming down his young face. "Elijah!" she called, her voice raw with anguish. "Call Miss Denise. Tell her what happened." Miss Denise, their neighbor, a retired teacher who often watched Elijah during Maya's late shifts, was her only hope now. "Shut up." Tate hissed, his grip bruising her arm. A black SUV rolled into the gas station, its tires crunching over the shards of Elijah's shattered phone. The driver's door swung open, and Sheriff Cole Mercer stepped out, towering and imposing with steel-gray hair and icy blue eyes that scanned the scene with chilling detachment. "What's the situation, Deputy?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "Suspected car thief, sir," Tate replied smugly. "Resisted arrest, and her kid tried to interfere." Mercer's gaze raked over Maya, his lip curling in disdain. "Is that right?" He didn't wait for her answer, turning to his deputies. "You know what to do." The words sent a shiver down Maya's spine. Why did they sound so rehearsed, like a ritual they'd performed countless times? "Please." Maya begged, locking eyes with Mercer, her voice cracking with desperation. "My son." "Should have raised him to respect law enforcement," Mercer cut in, his tone cold as steel. He nodded at Wilkins. "Get her out of here." Wilkins shoved Maya into the cruiser's back seat, her head slamming against the door frame. Pain exploded behind her eyes, but she clenched her jaw, refusing to cry out. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. As the door slammed shut, Maya's last glimpse was of Elijah, her precious boy, standing alone under the gas station's harsh lights, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The cruiser sped off, the station fading into the distance, taking with it any shred of justice or safety Maya had ever known in Westbrook. How could this be happening to her? Inside the cruiser, Maya struggled to steady her breathing, her chest tight with panic. She'd heard the stories, whispered warnings at church, hushed conversations in the hospital break room, worried murmurs at Elijah's school. Black folks vanishing into Westbrook's justice system for minor infractions, emerging days later with fabricated charges, bruised and broken. She'd always been so careful, always kept her head down, but caution hadn't saved her. Now she was trapped in their machine, and the fear that consumed her wasn't just for herself but for Elijah, left alone, terrified at that gas station. What would happen to him if she didn't make it out? Her mind raced, her heart pounding so loud she could barely think. The cruiser's interior was stifling, the air thick with the officer's malice. Tate glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes glinting with a cruel amusement that turned her blood to ice. "Hope you didn't have plans for the next few days," he chuckled darkly. "Sheriff Mercer likes to give our guests the full Westbrook experience." The words dripped with menace, each one a dagger to her heart. Maya closed her eyes, her thoughts flying to her brother Darius, somewhere across the globe, likely deep in a classified mission. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 years, their lives so different now, but oh, how she longed for his calm, steady voice to tell her everything would be okay. Would he even know she needed him? The cruiser veered onto a dark, deserted street, far from the main road, nowhere near the police station where they should have been headed. Maya's heart thundered against her ribs. Where were they taking her? "Where are we going?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of her fear. Wilkins turned in his seat, his grin wicked. "The scenic route, sweetheart. Sheriff likes to process special cases personally." Maya pressed herself against the door, as far from them as the handcuffs allowed, her body trembling. This wasn't just fear anymore, it was raw bone-deep terror. What did they have planned for her? The precinct loomed ahead, a squat, brutalist monstrosity with few windows and floodlights that cast more shadows than light. As the cruiser pulled into the rear entrance, hidden from public view, Maya felt like she was being swallowed by a beast, its jaws closing around her. The booking area reeked of bleach, sweat, and despair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of angry insects. Maya stood shivering, her handcuffs cutting into her wrists, as Officer Wilkins shoved her forward with a grunt. "Move it," he snapped, his roughness sending a jolt of pain through her already aching body. How much worse could this get? "Name." The booking officer, a heavy-set woman with bored, lifeless eyes, barked without looking up from her computer. "Maya Thompson," Maya replied, her voice steadier than she felt, clinging to her dignity. "I'm a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital. There's been a mistake." "Save it," Wilkins cut in, shoving her shoulder so hard she stumbled. "Caught stealing a vehicle at the quick stop on Elmwood." "That's a lie." Maya protested, her voice rising with indignation. "It's my car. I have proof." "And assaulting an officer," Wilkins added, drowning her out. "Resisting arrest." The booking officer sighed, typing the charges without a flicker of doubt, as if this was just another night in Westbrook's twisted system. "Empty your pockets," she ordered. Maya's hand shook as she placed her hospital ID badge, wallet, and a pack of gum on the counter, simple items from an ordinary life now weaponized against her. Wilkins snatched her wallet, rifling through it with a cruel smirk. "Well, look at this," he crowed, pulling out a small plastic bag of white powder. "Got ourselves some possession charges, too." Maya's blood ran cold, her stomach plummeting. "That's not mine," she cried, her voice breaking. "You planted that." Wilkins shrugged, his eyes gleaming with sadistic glee. "Guess that explains your erratic behavior, huh? High as a kite." He turned to the booking officer. "Add narcotics possession." The woman nodded, entering the charge without hesitation, as if framing someone was as routine as clocking in. How could they do this so casually? "I want to call my lawyer," Maya demanded, her voice hoarse with fear and fury. "I have rights." Wilkins laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in the sterile room. "Rights? That's cute. You'll get your phone call when we say you get it." After being fingerprinted and photographed like a common criminal, they led her down a long, grim corridor. The cells they passed were overcrowded, filled with women, mostly black or Latina, whose resigned expressions told stories of broken dreams and lost hope. At the end of the hall, they shoved her into a holding cell, already packed with 15 women in a space meant for 8. The door clanged shut, the sound reverberating through her like a death knell, sealing her in this nightmare. Would she ever see Elijah again? In the suffocating gloom of the Westbrook Police Department's booking area, the air reeked of bleach and despair, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of angry wasps overhead. "Name!" barked the booking officer, a heavy-set woman with cold, disinterested eyes that never left her computer screen. Maya Thompson stood trembling, her wrists raw from the handcuffs that bit into her skin, yet she forced her voice to hold steady. "Maya Thompson," she said, clinging to her dignity. "I'm a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital. There's been a terrible mistake. Save it." Officer Brad Wilkins snapped, shoving her shoulder with such force she stumbled, pain flaring through her aching body. "Caught stealing a vehicle at the Quick Stop on Elmwood." "That's a lie," Maya cried, her voice cracking with outrage. "It's my car. I have proof." "And assaulting an officer," Wilkins bellowed, drowning her out. "Resisting arrest." The booking officer sighed, her fingers flying across the keyboard as if this was just another night in their twisted game. "Empty your pockets," she ordered, her tone as lifeless as the concrete walls. Maya's hand shook as she placed her hospital ID badge, wallet, and a crumpled pack of gum on the counter, simple pieces of her ordinary life now turned against her. Wilkins snatched her wallet, his cruel smirk spreading like poison as he rifled through it. "Well, what do we have here?" he crowed, holding up a small plastic bag filled with white powder, his eyes glinting with sadistic glee. "Looks like possession charges, too." Maya's blood turned to ice, her stomach plummeting. "That's not mine," she screamed, her voice raw with terror. "You planted that." Wilkins shrugged, his nonchalance chilling. "Guess that explains your erratic behavior, huh? High as a kite." He turned to the booking officer, his voice dripping with mock authority. "Add narcotics possession to the charges." The woman nodded, typing it in without a flicker of doubt, as if framing an innocent woman was just another Tuesday night at Westbrook PD. How could they do this so casually? How could they strip her life away with such ease? "I want to call my lawyer," Maya demanded, her voice hoarse with fear and fury, her chest tight with panic. "I have rights." Wilkins let out a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed through the sterile room. "Rights? That's cute. You'll get your phone call when we say you get it, sweetheart." After being fingerprinted and photographed like a common criminal, they dragged her down a long, dimly lit corridor, the air thick with a stench of hopelessness. The cells they passed were overflowing, packed with women, mostly black or Latina, whose hollow eyes and slumped shoulders told stories of shattered lives and lost dreams. Finally, they reached a holding cell at the end of the hall, already crammed with at least 15 women in a space meant for 8. The door clanged shut behind her, the sound reverberating through her bones like a death knell, sealing her in this nightmare. Would she ever hold Elijah again? Would she ever see the light of day? Maya stood just inside the cell, her heart pounding as she took in the grim scene. A single toilet in the corner with no privacy screen, cold metal benches that offered no comfort, and the overwhelming smell of unwashed bodies and desperation that clung to the air like a fog. "First time," a voice rasped to her right, cutting through her spiraling thoughts. She turned to see a woman about her age, her tired eyes shadowed by a fading bruise on her cheekbone, a testament to the brutality of this place. "I shouldn't be here at all," Maya whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as if she could shield her heart from breaking. "They planted drugs on me." Janine nodded grimly, her expression heavy with understanding. "Classic Westbrook special. I'm Janine. Been here 3 weeks, waiting for a hearing that keeps getting pushed back. Welcome to hell." 3 weeks. Maya gasped, her voice barely above a whisper, horror clawing at her chest. "For what?" "Supposedly a broken taillight," Janine said, her voice bitter. "Then they claimed I had outstanding warrants, then unpaid tickets. They just keep piling on charges, like it's a game." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hushed warning. "Look, this precinct is notorious. They target black folks, plant evidence, falsify reports. Sheriff Mercer runs this county like his own personal kingdom." A chill snaked down Maya's spine, her mind reeling. "My son," she choked out, her voice breaking. "He's alone at the gas station. He's only 13. Janine squeezed her hand, her grip firm yet gentle. Someone will look out for him. The community knows what these cops are like. Hold on to that hope. Maya prayed she was right, but the image of Elijah, scared and alone under those harsh gas station lights, tore at her heart. Tears threatened to spill over, but she blinked them back furiously. Showing weakness here felt like handing her soul to the wolves. Hours dragged by in a haze of anxiety and discomfort, each minute stretching into eternity. Some women slept, huddled together on the icy floor for warmth. Others paced restlessly, their footsteps echoing in the cramped space. Maya perched on a sliver of bench, her mind a whirlwind of worry for Elijah and terror for her own fate. Was he safe? Was he crying for her? Around 3 a.m., the cell door clanged open, jolting her upright. Deputy Logan Tate loomed in the doorway, his face twisted into a mocking grin that sent a shiver through her. "Thompson, let's go," he barked. Maya stood, her legs stiff and unsteady, fear gripping her heart. "Where?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound brave. "Processing," Tate said vaguely, his eyes glinting with malice. "Move it." As she passed Janine, the woman whispered urgently, "Stay strong. Don't sign anything." The warning burned in Maya's mind as Tate led her away. He guided her through a maze of corridors, far from the main holding area, the silence of the administrative section eerie in the dead of night. The flickering lights cast long, menacing shadows on the walls, amplifying her dread. Tate stopped at a small windowless room with a single table and 2 chairs, its sterile coldness screaming of despair. "In," he ordered, his voice sharp. Maya stepped inside, her heart thundering so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. "I want my phone call," she said, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. "It's my right." Tate chuckled darkly, slamming the door behind them. "You'll get your call when I say you get it." Maya stood her ground, her chin lifted defiantly. "I'm a nurse. I know my rights. I demand to call." Her words were cut off by a sudden vicious jab to her stomach, the blow stealing her breath. She doubled over, gasping, pain radiating through her core. "Learn your place." Tate hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and rancid. "In here, you have no rights. No voice. You're nothing." Tears of pain and rage blurred her vision, but she glared at him through the haze. "You won't get away with this." Tate straightened, adjusting his uniform with a casual indifference that chilled her to the bone. "Thousands before you said the same thing. Guess what? We always do." How could such evil thrive unchecked? The door creaked open, and Sheriff Cole Mercer strode in, his towering presence filling the tiny room like a storm cloud. He carried a manila folder, which he dropped onto the table with a deliberate thud before sitting down, his icy blue eyes locking onto Maya. "Miss Thompson," he purred, his voice silky smooth yet dripping with danger. "Have a seat." Maya remained standing, one arm cradling her throbbing abdomen, her resolve hardening despite the fear gnawing at her. "I want to call my lawyer, and I need to know what happened to my son," she demanded, her voice trembling with urgency. Mercer's smile was cold, never reaching his dead eyes. "Your son's fine. Child Services picked him up." The casual delivery of such devastating news made Maya's knees buckle. She gripped the chair to steady herself, her heart shattering. "Child Services?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why?" "Abandoned minor," Mercer said with a shrug, as if it were nothing. "Standard procedure when a parent's arrested on drug charges. Drug charges that are completely fabricated." Maya exploded, her voice raw with fury, her hands clenching into fists. "You planted that bag." Mercer's smile faded, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Careful, Miss Thompson. Making false accusations against officers can lead to more charges." He opened the folder with a slow, deliberate motion, his voice chillingly calm. "You're already facing quite a list: car theft, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, possession of a controlled substance." "None of that's true," Maya said through gritted teeth, her anger battling her terror. "And now," Mercer continued, ignoring her, "we have reason to believe there's a firearm in your stolen vehicle." Terror gripped Maya's heart like a vice. "What? There's no gun in my car," she cried, her voice breaking. "Not yet," Mercer agreed mildly, sharing a knowing smirk with Tate. "But evidence has a way of turning up, doesn't it, Deputy?" Tate's grin was predatory. Indeed it does, Sheriff. How could they be so brazen, building a case to destroy her right in front of her? Maya's mind reeled, the sickening clarity of their plan crashing over her. They were weaving a web of lies that could lock her away for years, maybe decades, and they knew she was powerless to stop them. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, her heart pounding with dread. Mercer leaned forward, his pale eyes cold and lifeless, his voice a venomous hiss. "Consider it a reminder of how things work in Westbrook. Some folks need reminding from time to time." The racial undertone was unmistakable, a slap that stung deeper than any blow. Rage boiled inside Maya, threatening to spill over, but Mercer cut her off. "Your brother won't help you. No one will. That's the point, Miss Thompson." His words were a knife to her heart, but they sparked a memory. Darius, her warrior brother, who'd faced impossible odds before. Could he be her salvation? Mercer stood, straightening his uniform with a smug flourish. "Get comfortable. You're gonna be with us for a while." As he headed for the door, he paused, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "Oh, and if you keep making trouble, we might need to reevaluate your son's situation. Troubled kids from broken homes often end up in the system for years. Wouldn't that be a shame?" The threat hung in the air like poison, stealing Maya's breath. Her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Think about that before you decide how cooperative you want to be," Mercer said, nodding to Tate. "Take her back to holding." Tate grabbed her arm, his grip bruising, and Maya's mind raced as he dragged her back toward the cells. She needed help, someone to stand against this corrupt machine. Then it hit her, Darius, her brother, a Delta Force commander who'd faced worse odds in far darker places. He was her hope, her lifeline. Tate shoved her past a different corridor, one she hadn't seen before, and a man's scream echoed from the shadows, followed by a dull thud and chilling silence. Maya stiffened, her blood running cold. Tate noticed, his smile predatory. "Sounds like Officer Wilkins is conducting an interview." Horror crawled up her spine. "That's torture," she gasped. "That's Westbrook justice." Tate corrected, shoving her forward. "Like I said, get comfortable. You're in for a long stay." Back in the holding cell, the women's eyes met hers with a mix of sympathy and resignation, their haunted gazes mirroring her own. They knew the pain of Westbrook's processing all too well. Janine made room on the bench, her voice soft. "You okay?" Maya shook her head, words failing her. The pain in her stomach had dulled, but the fear for Elijah and her future threatened to swallow her whole. "They're trying to break you," Janine whispered fiercely. "Don't let them." "My son." Maya choked out, her voice cracking. "They said child services took him." A woman across the cell spoke up, her voice weary. "They say that to everyone with kids. Half the time, it's a lie to make you panic and cooperate." "And the other half?" Maya asked, her heart in her throat. The woman looked away, her silence deafening. "Then you better pray someone's looking out for them." Could Elijah be safe, or was he lost to her forever? The night dragged on, Maya dozing fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, her mind tortured by images of Elijah alone. Around dawn, the cell door creaked open, and a disheveled man in a rumpled suit stood there, clutching a worn briefcase. "Thompson," he called, his voice bored. "I'm Kevin Burris, public defender." Maya stood, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. "I didn't ask for a public defender. I want my own lawyer." Burris sighed, glancing at his watch impatiently. "Look, I got 15 minutes before my next case. You want my help or not?" Reluctantly, Maya followed him to a small conference room, its barred window offering a bleak view of a brick wall, a cruel reminder of her captivity. Burris skipped pleasantries, his tone flat. "You're in a world of trouble, Miss Thompson. Car theft, drug possession, resisting arrest." "None of that's true," Maya interrupted, her voice rising with desperation. "They planted evidence, fabricated charges. I was just getting gas with my son." Burris barely looked up from his notes, his disinterest infuriating. "Yeah, everyone says that. Because it happens." Maya insisted, slamming her hand on the table. "Ask anyone in that cell. This precinct targets black citizens, plants evidence, save it for someone who can do something about it. Burris cut in, his voice sharp. Here's my offer. Plead guilty to lesser charges, disorderly conduct, small possession, and they'll drop the car theft. You'll do 6 months, maybe less. Plead guilty to lies? How could she betray herself like that? Maya stared at Kevin Burris, her eyes wide with disbelief, her heart pounding in her chest. Plead guilty to crimes I didn't commit? Absolutely not, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and desperation. How could he suggest she betray herself like that? Burris finally lifted his gaze from his notes, his expression a weary blend of pity and exasperation that only deepened her anger. Miss Thompson, let me be crystal clear, it doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is what they say happened, and they say you're guilty. His words hit her like a slap, stealing her breath. But there were witnesses. Maya protested, her voice rising, clinging to the memory of the crowd at the gas station. People saw everything. They know I'm innocent. Burris shook his head, his sigh heavy with cynicism. And how many of them will dare testify against the police in this town? Be realistic. No judge in Westbrook is going to believe you over Sheriff Mercer and his deputies. The harsh truth of his words felt like a weight crushing her chest. How could justice be so twisted? Tears of frustration burned Maya's eyes, threatening to spill over as she fought to keep her composure. So I'm just supposed to accept this? Let them destroy my life, take my son away from me, she cried, her voice cracking with the raw pain of a mother's fear. Burris began packing up his papers, his movements brisk and detached. I'm not saying it's fair, he muttered, avoiding her gaze. I'm saying it's reality. As he stood to leave, Maya's heart sank. She realized he hadn't asked a single meaningful question about her case. He hadn't even pretended to care about her innocence. You're working with them, aren't you? She asked quietly, her voice trembling with accusation. Burris paused at the door, and for a fleeting moment, something like shame flickered across his face, a crack in his indifferent facade. Everyone works with them, Miss Thompson. That's how this town survives. He glanced at his watch, his voice cold again. Think about that plea deal. It's the best you're gonna get. How could he walk away so easily, leaving her to drown in this nightmare? A guard escorted Maya back to the holding cell, her steps heavy, her body numb as the full weight of her situation pressed down like a suffocating blanket. No one was coming to save her. No one was fighting for justice, except wait. There was one person, one call she hadn't made yet. As faint daylight filtered through the high barred windows of the cell, Maya's thoughts turned to her brother Darius. Their last conversation months ago echoed in her mind, a brief call from some secret location, his voice tired but strong, filled with the quiet strength that had always defined him. He was the warrior of their family, the protector, while she had chosen healing as a nurse. He had chosen to fight, and right now, she needed a fighter more than ever. Could Darius be her lifeline in this darkness? Around 8 a.m., the cell door clanged open, jolting Maya from her thoughts. An officer stood there, his voice gruff. Thompson, phone call. Her heart leaped, pounding so fiercely she could barely breathe. This was it, her one chance. She stood, her legs shaky but her resolve ironclad, and followed the officer to a row of payphones mounted on the wall, each separated by a flimsy plastic divider that offered only the illusion of privacy. 5 minutes, he barked, stepping back just far enough to pretend he wasn't listening. Maya's fingers trembled as she dialed the number, not just any number, but a secure line only a handful of people in the world knew, a number Darius had given her years ago with a stern warning, only use this if your life depends on it. Today, she was certain it did. Would he answer? Could he save her? The line rang once, twice, 3 times, each ring stretching her nerves to the breaking point. Maya held her breath, praying with every fiber of her being that he'd pick up. Then, finally, Thompson. The calm, measured voice of her brother flooded her ears, and tears sprang to her eyes, relief washing over her like a tidal wave. Darius, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. It's Maya. I need help. There was a brief pause, and then his tone shifted, sharper, more focused, like a blade being drawn. Tell me. As quickly and quietly as she could, Maya poured out her story, the gas station, the false arrest, the planted drugs, the chilling threats against Elijah. With each word, she could feel Darius's silent rage building across the line, a storm gathering strength. How could anyone dare to hurt his family? Who did this to you? Darius asked, his voice now eerily calm, a terrifying stillness that sent a shiver down her spine. Sheriff Cole Mercer, Deputy Logan Tate, Officer Brad Wilkins, Westbrook Police Department. Maya recited, each name bitter on her tongue, laced with the pain of their cruelty. They're gonna frame me, Darius. They're gonna take Elijah. I don't know what to do. Another pause, longer this time, heavy with unspoken fury. When Darius spoke again, his voice carried the same unyielding resolve she'd heard only once before, after their parents' funeral, when he'd vowed to protect her always. Stay strong, he said. I'm coming. Those simple words, so fierce, so certain, made Maya's knees buckle with relief. Darius wasn't just her brother. He was a Delta Force commander, a man who'd faced impossible odds and won. Could he really end this nightmare? What should I do until then? She asked, wiping away tears that streamed down her cheeks, her heart clinging to his promise. Resist nothing, say nothing, sign nothing. His instructions came rapid-fire, precise, like a soldier briefing his team. Don't antagonize them. Don't give them any reason to hurt you. Just wait. How long? Maya pressed, her voice trembling with urgency. 24 hours, no more. There was steel in his voice, unyielding and fierce. And Maya, this ends today. The line went dead, but Maya didn't hang up right away. She held the receiver to her ear, drawing strength from the echo of Darius's promise, a lifeline in the darkness. Could she hold on that long? Could she keep her hope alive? When she turned around, her heart skipped a beat. Sheriff Cole Mercer stood behind her, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, his presence like a predator circling its prey. Productive call, he asked, his tone deceptively light, but his gaze was sharp, probing. Maya met his stare, a newfound courage stirring within her, bolstered by Darius's words. Just letting someone know where I am, she said steadily, a defiance she wouldn't have dared minutes ago. Mercer studied her, noticing the subtle shift in her demeanor. Fear still lingered, but now it was tempered by something else, something like hope. It clearly unnerved him. Who exactly did you call Miss Thompson? He pressed, his voice low and dangerous. Maya thought of Darius, of the storm now barreling toward Mercer and his corrupt kingdom. Part of her wanted to warn him, to see fear flicker in his cold eyes for once, but Darius's lessons rang in her mind. Never let the enemy see you coming. So she simply said, my family, and left it at that, her voice calm but firm. Mercer's eyes narrowed further, his jaw tightening. He couldn't pinpoint what had changed, but he sensed it, and it rattled him. He gestured to the guard, his voice sharp. Take her back to holding and watch her. As Maya was led away, she caught a glimpse of uncertainty on Mercer's face, a crack in his armor. He knew something was different, but couldn't name the threat. That was Darius's first rule of warfare. The most dangerous enemy is the one you don't see until it's too late. Could Mercer feel the noose tightening? For the first time since this nightmare began, Maya felt a spark beyond fear and despair, a fragile, undeniable hope. In her mind, she heard the faint echo of approaching footsteps, not the blare of sirens or flashing lights, but the silent, relentless advance of her brother, trained to strike in the world's most dangerous places. Westbrook, with all its cruelty and corruption, had just become the most perilous place for Sheriff Cole Mercer. As she settled back on the hard bench in the holding cell, Maya closed her eyes, picturing Elijah's face, his brave smile. Hold on, baby, she whispered to herself, her voice soft but fierce. Uncle Darius is coming. The chaos of the cell, women arguing, crying, or staring blankly, felt distant now. Her call to Darius had changed everything. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Could she endure until he arrived? The cell door clanged open, shattering the fragile quiet, and Officer Wilkins appeared, his face twisted in its usual sneer, his presence like a dark cloud. Thompson, get up, he barked, his voice dripping with contempt. Maya rose silently, heeding Darius's advice. Resist nothing, say nothing, sign nothing. Wilkins grabbed her arm roughly, his grip bruising. Sheriff wants you transferred, he said, his tone mocking. Seems you've become a problem. Maya stayed silent, her heart racing but her face a mask of calm as he led her through the corridors. Mercer was panicking. He didn't know who Darius was yet, but he sensed a shift, a change in the air that predators like him could smell. Was his empire starting to crumble? In the processing area, Sheriff Mercer waited, his thumbs hooked in his belt loops, trying to project casual authority. But Maya noticed a tightness around his eyes, a flicker of unease that hadn't been there before. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice deliberately measured, "there's been a change of plans. You're being transferred to county, pending your arraignment." Maya met his gaze, her newfound strength holding firm. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady, challenging his lie. Mercer's jaw tightened, her composure clearly unsettling him.
Overcrowding. No signe personnel.
It was a blatant lie, and they both knew it. Westbrook's holding cells were never too full to keep someone Mercer wanted to torment. "Who did you call?" he asked abruptly, his eyes boring into hers, searching for weakness.
My brother.
Maya answered simply, her voice calm but laced with defiance. "And who exactly is your brother?" Mercer pressed, his tone sharpening. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. Darius kept his Delta Force role classified, his military career a closely guarded secret, but right now, she wanted Mercer to feel the fear he inflicted on others every day. "Someone who doesn't like bullies," she replied, her eyes locked on his, a spark of rebellion flaring within her. Mercer stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen carefully. I don't know who you think is coming to save you, but no one crosses me in my county. No one." Maya said nothing, but her silence spoke louder than any defiance, unnerving him more than she could have hoped. "Get her ready for transport," he barked at Wilkins, then stalked away, his boots echoing down the corridor like the march of a man on edge. Was he starting to feel the walls closing in? As Wilkins processed her transfer paperwork, the precinct doors burst open with a force that made everyone freeze. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair marched in, dragging a reluctant Elijah by the hand.
Miss Denise.
Maya gasped, relief flooding her like a warm tide at the sight of her son, safe and alive. Denise Williams, Maya's neighbor and Elijah's occasional caretaker, was a retired school principal with a backbone of steel, her presence commanding the room. She strode to the front desk, her voice ringing with authority. "I'm here about Maya Thompson," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "And to report that this child was abandoned at a gas station by your officers, which is against every procedure in the book." The desk sergeant stammered, "Ma'am, we're not at liberty to discuss. I'm not asking you to discuss anything." Denise cut him off, her voice sharp as a whip. "I'm telling you I have temporary guardianship papers for this child, signed by his mother, and I'm here to inform you he was left alone at a gas station at midnight. Or would you prefer I call the state attorney general's office to discuss it?" Could Denise's courage shake this corrupt system? The sergeant's face paled, his confidence crumbling. "Wait here," he muttered, disappearing down a hallway. Elijah spotted his mother and broke free from Denise, running to her with a cry of "Mom." Maya's heart ached. She wanted nothing more than to wrap him in her arms, but her handcuffs held her back. She crouched down, meeting him at eye level, her voice trembling with love.
Are you okay, baby?
Elijah nodded, his eyes red-rimmed from crying, but his brave face breaking her heart. Miss Denise came to the gas station. Someone called her. The community looks out for its own. Denise said, joining them, her voice warm but fierce. That young man in the suit who was filming? He recognized Elijah from the community center basketball league. Called me right away. Maya's heart swelled with gratitude, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Denise squeezed her shoulder, her touch a lifeline. "What are they charging you with?" she asked, her eyes narrowing with determination. Could this be the start of their fight back? Before Maya could respond to Denise's question, the air in the precinct grew thick with tension as Sheriff Cole Mercer stormed out from a side door, his face dark and stormy, his presence like a thundercloud ready to unleash havoc. "Miss Williams," he barked, his voice dripping with recognition as he locked eyes with the retired principal, his gaze cold and calculating. "This is a restricted area." Denise, unyielding as ever, met his stare with icy defiance, her silver-streaked hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. "Sheriff Mercer," she shot back, her tone sharp and unapologetic.
"Still running this place like your own personal kingdom, ici."
Mercer's smile was tight, a thin veil over his simmering rage. "Miss Thompson's being transferred to county. She's facing serious charges. Fabricated charges." Denise countered, her voice ringing with righteous fury. Just like the ones you tried to pin on my nephew last year. Just like the ones you've used to terrorize this community for a decade. How could one woman stand so fearlessly against such corruption? Mercer's face darkened, his jaw clenching as his control wavered.
Be careful, Denise.
Even respected retired principals can find themselves on the wrong side of the law. Denise didn't flinch, her backbone of steel holding firm, her eyes blazing with resolve. "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" she challenged, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Because I keep excellent records. Would you like me to share them with the state attorney general? Or maybe the FBI?" For a moment, the tension crackled like lightning, the air heavy with the weight of her words. Mercer forced a laugh, a hollow, uneasy sound that betrayed his unease. "Always the fighter, Denise, but this isn't your battle," he sneered, nodding to Wilkins with a curt gesture.
Finish processing the prisonnier.
But Denise turned to Maya, her voice softening with fierce determination. "Don't worry about Elijah. He'll stay with me until you're released, and you will be released." She aimed those last words directly at Mercer, her stare unyielding, a promise that shook the sheriff's smug facade. Maya knelt, her heart aching as she hugged Elijah as best she could with her cuffed hands, the metal biting into her wrists.
Be good for Miss Denise, okay? I'll be home soon.
"I promise. Promise." Elijah's voice was small, trembling with fear, his eyes searching hers for hope. "Promise." Maya said firmly, her voice thick with love.
And remember what I always tell you. Thompson family never break a promise.
Elijah finished, a ghost of a smile flickering on his lips, a spark of courage amidst his tears. Could this vow hold them together through the storm? As Wilkins dragged Maya away, her heart twisted at the sight of Denise and Elijah standing together, a small beacon of love and protection in a sea of corruption. She mouthed "thank you" to Denise, who nodded with unwavering resolve, her strength a lifeline in Maya's darkest hour. Wilkins shoved her toward the exit, his voice a low growl. "Your neighborhood watchdog won't help you where you're going. She already has." Maya shot back, her voice steady with newfound defiance. Elijah was safe, that was what mattered most. How could she cling to hope when everything seemed so hopeless? 3,000 miles away, in a secure communications room at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Commander Darius Thompson stood like a statue, his face carved in granite, his eyes locked on satellite imagery of Westbrook glowing across multiple screens. His heart burned with a cold, unyielding rage after Maya's desperate call, a call that had shattered his world. He'd cut short a critical training exercise, pulling every string at the highest levels to race back to U.S. soil within hours, his urgency unquestioned by those who knew his name. Darius Thompson was a legend in Special Forces, a man whose classified missions were whispered about in the Pentagon's darkest corners, missions so secret most didn't know the half of his feats. Could he wield that power to save his sister? "What do we have?" he demanded, his voice low but commanding, cutting through the room's tense silence. Carter Reed, his second-in-command and closest friend, stepped forward, his sharp eyes reflecting years of shared battles. A former intelligence officer with connections across the government, Reed had assembled a crack team in record time. Westbrook Police Department, rural jurisdiction, run by Sheriff Cole Mercer for 15 years. Reed began, pulling up personnel files on a screen, each one a piece of the corrupt puzzle. Mercer treats the department like his personal empire. Complaints of corruption, brutality, and racial profiling pile up, but they vanish in the system. "Political connections?" Darius asked, his mind already strategizing. Lisa Guan, a cybersecurity expert who'd served with Darius on 3 classified ops, answered with precision. "Strong ties to State Senator James Whitaker and Judge Richard Palmer, who handles most criminal cases in the county. They're old college buddies, same fraternity." How deep did this web of corruption run?
Financial situation.
Marcus Green, a forensic accountant who tracked terrorist funds across borders, pointed to another screen, his voice grim. "The sheriff's department budget's riddled with discrepancies. Mercer lives way beyond his salary, vacation homes, boats, luxury cars. We're tracing the money, but early signs point to drug trafficking along the I-95 corridor."
Darius absorbed every word, his mind a battlefield, mapping out strategy with lethal precision.
"What about my sister and nephew?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Maya's being transferred to county jail." Reed said. Our contact at the State Attorney General's office says it's odd. Westbrook PD usually holds suspects for at least 48 hours before transfer. He's spooked. Darius observed, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Good. And my nephew. Elijah's with a neighbor, Denise Williams. Guan added. Retired school principal, clean record, respected in the community. Darius nodded, a ghost of a smile softening his hard features for a moment. Maya always picked good friends, he murmured, his voice tinged with pride. He stepped closer to the screens, studying Westbrook's layout like a general analyzing a war zone. Operations, terrain, choke points, escape routes. It wasn't so different from the battlefields he'd conquered before, except this enemy war badges, sworn to uphold the law they defiled. I need everything, he said quietly, his voice a steel blade. Every case where Mercer's department falsified evidence, every wrongful arrest, every victim too scared to speak, every shady deal, every political favor, every dirty secret. How could he dismantle this empire of lies? The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over his team. This wasn't a sanctioned mission, it was personal. Reed voiced their shared concern. Darius, you're talking about taking down an entire police department. If this goes wrong, it won't. Darius cut him off, his tone unyielding. I'm not asking anyone to risk their career. This is my fight, my sister, my responsibility. Like hell it is. Green shot back, his loyalty fierce. We're a team. Guan nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. Always have been. Just tell us the plan. Darius looked at their faces, comrades who'd followed him into the jaws of danger, trusting him with their lives, and felt a surge of gratitude that briefly tempered his icy rage. Two-phase operation, he said decisively. Phase 1, extract Maya from County, secure her and Elijah in a safe location. Phase 2, dismantle Mercer's operation piece by piece, gather evidence, find federal allies, and make sure this never happens again. Reed studied him, his voice low. And if Mercer or his deputies resist? Darius's expression hardened, his eyes like flint. Then they'll learn why the world's most dangerous call me sir. Could they pull off this impossible mission? Maya sat in the back of the transport van, her hands cuffed to the bench, her body swaying with each jarring turn, her heart racing as fear gnawed at her. Deputy Tate drove, his silence unnerving, while Wilkins rode shotgun, his usual sneer absent. Maya suspected her call to Darius and Denise's bold entrance had thrown their routine into chaos. Through the small mesh-covered window, she saw they were on a back road, far from the main highway to county jail. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't a routine transfer. Where are we going? She asked, breaking the tense silence, her voice steady despite her dread. Tate glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes cold as ice. Taking the scenic route, he said, his tone laced with menace. Why were they veering off course? Maya's mind raced. If they meant to harm her, this isolated road was their chance, away from witnesses, away from cameras. She forced herself to stay calm, to think clearly. A lot of people know where I am, she said evenly, her voice firm. Miss Williams, my son, the lawyer. Wilkins turned, his sneer returning. That public defender? He works for us, sweetheart. As for the old lady and your kid, who's gonna believe them over sworn officers? The van turned onto a dirt road, plunging into a wooded area, the darkness closing in. Fear rose in Maya's throat, but she pushed it down. Panic wouldn't save her now. Could she outsmart them?
Sud-en-Lit, the radio crackle de tout life, shattering the silence.
Unit 12, this is dispatch. Tate grabbed the radio, his voice sharp.
DC Suni 12.
Sheriff Mercer wants you to divert to the station immediately. We have a situation. Tate and Wilkins exchanged wary glances.
What kind of situation? Tate demanded.
Sheriff says secure the prisoner and return now. Tate cursed under his breath, then made a sharp U-turn, sending Maya sliding across the bench, pain shooting through her wrists. Guess your scenic tour's on hold, she said quietly, a spark of defiance in her voice. Wilkins spun around, his face twisted with anger. Don't get comfortable.
10 cents au verre.
Was Darius's influence already shaking their plans?
The radio crackled again, the voice urgent.
All units, be advised, federal agents are at the courthouse, asking questions about the Thompson arrest. Sheriff wants all hands at the station. Maya's heart soared, a surge of hope flooding her. Darius was moving faster than she'd dreamed. Whatever connections he'd pulled were already working. Tate slammed his palm against the steering wheel, his voice a growl. Federal agents?
What the hell is going on?
Wilkins turned to Maya, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Who exactly is your brother? Maya met his gaze, her voice steady and fierce. Someone you really shouldn't have pissed off. Could Darius's storm be breaking over Westbrook? The Westbrook Police Department was a whirlwind of chaos when the van pulled in, officers scrambling like ants in a shattered nest, shredding documents, wiping computers, and clearing evidence lockers in a frantic bid to cover their tracks. Sheriff Mercer stood in the bullpen center, barking orders, his face flushed with a mix of anger and fear, his empire teetering on the edge. As Tate and Wilkins hauled Maya inside, Mercer stormed over, his voice a snarl. What part of transfer her to county wasn't clear. Dispatch called us back. Tate explained, his tone defensive. Said you wanted all hands here, 'cause the feds are swarming the courthouse. Mercer hissed, his eyes blazing as he jabbed a finger at Maya. They're asking questions about her. What did you do? How could one woman unravel his control? Maya stayed silent, but a slight smile curved her lips, a quiet defiance that infuriated Mercer. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully, his voice a low growl. Who is your brother? Before she could answer, the precinct door swung open with a force that silenced the room. A tall man in a pristine suit strode in, flanked by 2 agents in FBI windbreakers, his presence radiating quiet authority, his gaze sweeping the chaotic scene with clinical precision. Sheriff Cole Mercer? He asked, though it wasn't really a question, his voice calm but commanding. Mercer released Maya's arm, straightening his uniform, trying to regain his composure. That's right.
And you are?
Special Agent James Wilson, FBI, he said, flashing his credentials with a steely gaze. We're here about Maya Thompson. Was this the moment justice began to fight back? Mercer forced a casual smile, his voice oily with false confidence.
Just a routine arrest, Agent Wilson.
In fact, we were transferring her to county for processing. Wilson's expression remained neutral, his eyes piercing through Mercer's facade. In a van that took a detour into Wagner Woods? Interesting route to the county jail. Mercer's mask slipped, his eyes darting to Tate and Wilkins, betraying his unease. My deputies must have gotten turned around. New to the area, both of them. With a combined 23 years on the force. Wilson countered, consulting a file in his hand, his voice laced with skepticism. Fascinating. Maya watched, her hope growing. This wasn't just any FBI agent. This was someone Darius had sent, someone ready to tear down Mercer's lies. Could this be her salvation? Wilson turned to Maya, his voice softening but firm.
Miss Thompson, are you all right?
Yes, sir, she answered, lifting her cuffed hands, the metal glinting under the harsh lights. Though I'd feel better without these. Remove the restraints. Wilson ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mercer stepped forward, his voice rising in protest.
Now, wait a minute.
She's facing serious charges. Fabricated charges. Wilson cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. We have witness statements from the gas station, including video evidence that mysteriously wasn't logged into your system. He nodded to an agent, who produced a tablet displaying the footage taken by the brave businessman at the quick stop, a lifeline in digital form. Could this evidence finally expose Mercer's corruption? The color drained from Sheriff Cole Mercer's face, his smug facade crumbling like dry clay as Special Agent James Wilson's words hit him like a sledgehammer. That doesn't change, Mercer stammered, his voice faltering, but Wilson cut him off with a calm, steely edge that sent shivers down Maya's spine.
It change everything.
Wilson declared, his gaze unwavering. Especially when paired with the financial audit our forensic accountants are tearing through right now. Interesting spending habits you've got, Sheriff. How could Mercer's empire of lies unravel so fast? Maya rubbed her wrists, the raw skin stinging as Officer Wilkins reluctantly fumbled with the handcuffs, his hands trembling as he removed them, his bravado shattered. Miss Thompson, Wilson continued, his voice softening but firm, "You're free to go. One of my agents will take your statement, but not here." He cast a withering glance around the precinct, his distaste for its corruption palpable. "We'll get you home safe." Could this nightmare finally be ending?
D'ici outrajou.
Mercer blustered, his voice rising in a desperate attempt to cling to his fading power, but the lack of conviction made his words ring hollow. "You can't just barge in here and, actually we can." Wilson interrupted, his tone sharp as a blade, handing Mercer a document with a flourish. "Especially with a warrant signed by a federal judge. Your department's now under investigation for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and financial crimes." As Wilson spoke, a flood of FBI agents poured into the precinct, carrying boxes and equipment, their purposeful strides echoing like a death knell for Mercer's reign. Westbrook's officers stood frozen, their jaws dropped, watching their world collapse in real time. How could Darius have orchestrated this so swiftly? Maya followed Wilson outside, her legs shaky but her heart soaring as she stepped into the cool night air, leaving the precinct, a place of terror just hours ago, now swarming with federal agents tearing through its dark secrets. She climbed into a waiting black SUV, her mind reeling at how fast everything had changed. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and disbelief.
Sommière Saf.
Wilson answered, his tone reassuring.
Your brother is waiting. Darius.
The thought of him sent a wave of warmth through her, a beacon in the storm. Could she finally be reunited with her family? The safe house was a modest ranch-style home nestled on the outskirts of town, surrounded by vast open fields that stretched into the darkness, making it impossible for anyone to approach unseen. As Maya stepped out of the SUV, the front door swung open, and Darius Thompson emerged, his 6 feet 2 inches frame towering with broad shoulders and the coiled alertness of a predator ready to strike. Yet, as he crossed the distance between them, his hard, battle-scarred features softened, his eyes filled with a tenderness that broke Maya's heart. Without a word, he pulled her into a tight embrace, his strength enveloping her like a shield. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair, his voice thick with regret. "I should have been here sooner." Maya clung to him, her body trembling as she finally let the full weight of her ordeal crash over her, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You came," she choked out, her voice raw with gratitude.
Det soldat metters.
How could she ever thank him for saving her? Inside, Maya's heart leaped as she saw Elijah and Denise waiting, their faces lighting up at the sight of her. Her son flew into her arms, his small frame shaking as she held him close, her tears falling freely now. "You're safe," she murmured, kissing his forehead, her voice trembling with love and relief.
You're safe, baby.
Over Elijah's shoulder, her eyes met Denise's, the retired principal's steady gaze filled with warmth and strength. "Thank you for protecting him," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Denise nodded, her smile soft but fierce. "Family looks out for family, and in this community, we're all family." As Elijah reluctantly let go, Maya turned to Darius, who watched the reunion with a rare softness in his eyes, a crack in his warrior's armor. "How did you pull this off so fast?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Could one man really turn the tide against such corruption? Darius guided her to a table cluttered with laptops and communication gear, his team working with focused intensity. "Maya, meet my crew," he said, introducing them one by one. Carter Reed, his loyal second-in-command. Lisa Guan, a cybersecurity genius. Marcus Green, a forensic accountant with a knack for uncovering secrets. "We've been at it non-stop since your call," Reed explained, his voice grim but determined. "Mercer's department's been rotten for years, shielded by political connections and intimidation. No one could get close enough to gather solid evidence, until they messed with the wrong family." Guan added with a sly smile, her eyes sparkling with defiance. Green pointed to his laptop screen, data scrolling like a map to Mercer's downfall. "We've traced financial irregularities back a decade. Mercer and his cronies have been skimming seized assets, taking bribes to ignore drug shipments, extorting local businesses, and that's just the start." How deep did this corruption go? Darius pulled up a chair for Maya, his voice steady but fierce. "Once we started digging, we found a pattern of false arrests targeting mostly black citizens, people who couldn't fight back, the most vulnerable." Maya's thoughts flashed to Janine and the other women in that cramped cell, their haunted eyes etched in her memory. "How many people?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger and sorrow. Hundreds. Reed answered, his tone heavy with grim reality. Some were coerced into pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. Some are still locked up. We're working with the Department of Justice now. Darius explained, his eyes burning with purpose. This isn't just about you anymore, Maya. It's about tearing down an entire system of corruption. Could they really bring justice to so many? Maya absorbed the weight of his words, a torrent of emotions crashing over her, relief at her freedom, rage at the injustice ravaging her community, and a fierce determination to see this through. What's next? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm within. Darius's expression hardened, his jaw set like stone. Phase 2, he declared, his words a promise of reckoning. How would they dismantle Mercer's empire once and for all? Back at the precinct, Sheriff Cole Mercer paced his office like a caged beast, his phone pressed to his ear, sweat beading on his forehead as his carefully built kingdom crumbled around him. I don't care what it takes, he hissed into the receiver, his voice desperate. Make this go away. State Senator James Whitaker's voice crackled with stress on the other end. It's not that simple, Cole. The feds have a federal warrant.
Judge Palmer can't block it.
Then find someone who can. Mercer snarled, his fist slamming against his desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. We all go down if this keeps up.
Roman Bedet.
He ended the call, his hand shaking as he tossed the phone aside. Everything was unraveling. FBI agents were swarming every corner of the precinct, seizing computers, files, and evidence, tearing through his secrets like vultures. Most of his officers were being grilled, and Tate and Wilkins had been hauled off in cuffs after agents found the drugs they used to frame innocent people like Maya. How had it come to this? A knock at his door made Mercer's head snap up, his heart pounding. Agent Wilson stood there, his calm demeanor more unnerving than any show of force, his eyes piercing through Mercer's crumbling facade.
Your turn for questioning, Sheriff.
Wilson said, his voice steady but laced with authority. Mercer straightened his uniform, clutching at the last threads of his power, his voice defiant but hollow.
I've got nothing to hide.
Then you won't mind explaining these? Wilson replied, placing a stack of photographs on the desk, damning images of Mercer meeting drug traffickers, accepting thick envelopes, shaking hands with criminals. Mercer's blood ran cold, his stomach churning. These shots were taken with long-range lenses from vantage points that screamed military-grade surveillance, the kind only someone with special forces expertise could pull off. Who was behind this? Who is Maya Thompson's brother? Mercer whispered, his voice barely audible, dread pooling in his gut. Wilson's smile was icy, his words cutting like a blade. Someone you really should have left alone. At that moment, Mercer's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, for chilling words flashing on the screen, "This is only beginning." His eyes darted to the window, and his breath caught. A tall, broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes stood across the street, watching him with an unyielding gaze. Though they'd never met, Mercer knew instantly it was Darius Thompson, the shadow now hunting him. The man held his stare for a long, agonizing moment, then turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving Mercer with a feeling he'd never known, fear pure and paralyzing. Could he escape the storm Darius was bringing? At the safe house, Maya sat beside Darius on the porch, the cool evening air soothing her aching body as she watched Elijah play basketball with Reed in the driveway, his laughter a balm to her wounded spirit. Her ordeal had left scars, but her heart was healing, buoyed by the love around her. Mercer won't go down easy, she said, her voice tinged with worry. He's got connections. Had connections. Darius corrected, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Amazing how fast political allies scatter when federal indictments loom. Maya studied her brother's profile, his calm strength a rock she could lean on. You didn't just call in a favor with the FBI, did you?
This is bigger.
Darius paused, his gaze distant for a moment. Let's just say I reminded some folks in Washington that justice shouldn't depend on who you know or the color of your skin. How could one man wield such influence? What about the other victims, the women I met in that cell? Maya asked, her voice heavy with a memory of their shared pain. They're being processed for release. Darius assured her, his tone firm. And our legal team's prepping class action suits against the county. No one's sweeping this under the rug. Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, overwhelmed by gratitude yet haunted by how close she'd come to losing everything. I was lucky, she whispered, her voice soft but raw. I had you. But how many don't? Darius wrapped an arm around her, his voice steady but fierce. That's why this can't stop with Mercer. The system that propped him up has to change. Could they spark a revolution? As Elijah sank a perfect jump shot, his cheer echoing in the dusk, Maya and Darius felt the weight of their shared truth. Her ordeal was fading, but the fight for justice was just igniting. For Westbrook's corrupt officers, the nightmare was only beginning, a nightmare masterminded by a Delta Force commander who'd faced terrorists and warlords but never an enemy who enraged him more than those who dared harm his family. Could they bring down the entire rotten system? 3 days later, the morning sun cast long shadows across Mercer's office as he paced like a trapped animal, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a frantic hiss. I don't care what it costs, he growled. Find out who Darius Thompson is and what he's capable of. His contact at the State Bureau of Investigation sounded jittery.
Call, you don't get it.
This guy's file is redacted to hell and back. Delta Force isn't just special forces, it's the elite of the elite. Black Ops, counterterrorism, high-value targets, their missions don't even exist on paper. Mercer froze, his heart pounding. So he's dangerous. More than dangerous. He's got medals nobody knows about, and he's called in every favor he's owed. The Attorney General, the FBI, even Pentagon brass, they're all coming for you. Mercer's jaw tightened, his mind racing.
No one is intouchable. Everyone's got a weakness.
Did you hear me?
The Pentagon.
His weakness is his sister. Mercer snapped. And her kid. A long pause followed, the contact's voice low.
Call, don't do anything stupid.
These people can make you vanish.
No.
Mercer said coldly, his voice a chilling vow. They made a mistake. They left me alive with nothing to lose. He slammed the phone down, his hands shaking with defiance. Could he outmaneuver Darius? Tate and Wilkins, released on bail but part of Mercer's dwindling network, sat across from him, their faces haggard, fear etched in their eyes. The Fed seized everything. Tate said, his voice tight.
Every case, every arrest.
Let them look. Mercer dismissed, his tone falsely confident. Paper trails vanish, witnesses recant, judges can be bought. This feels different. Wilkins muttered, fidgeting with his watch, his nerves fraying. My lawyer says they've got surveillance, financials going back years. Mercer leaned forward, his voice a dangerous whisper.
You losing your nerve, Brad.
Wilkins swallowed hard. No, sir. I'm just saying, I don't care what you're saying. Mercer cut him off, his eyes blazing. I care about loyalty. Can I count on you two to do what needs doing? Could they hold his crumbling empire together, or would they break under the pressure? The two officers, Tate and Wilkins, exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale with fear, their eyes darting nervously in the dim light of Mercer's office. Despite the dread gnawing at their guts, they knew they were in too deep, their fates irrevocably tied to Sheriff Cole Mercer's sinking ship. What's the plan? Tate finally asked, his voice low and strained, barely masking his rising panic. Mercer's lips curled into a cold, sinister smile, a chilling expression that never reached his icy eyes. First, we call in reinforcements, he declared, his tone dripping with menace. He reached for a burner phone, one untraceable to the department, and dialed a number from memory with deliberate precision. When the call connected, he spoke just 3 words, each one heavy with intent, I need help. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost too casual, sending a shiver down Maya's spine from miles away. That'll be expensive, Sheriff, it drawled. Money's no issue. Mercer snapped, his voice urgent. But timing is.
Tonight.
Consider it done, the voice replied, and the line went dead, leaving a chilling silence.
What kind of monsters was Mercer summoning now?
Mercer turned back to his deputies, his eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. Now we get ahead of the narrative. We plant the seeds of doubt, he hissed, his voice low and conspiratorial.
How?
Wilkins asked, his brow furrowed, his hands fidgeting with nervous energy.
By turning Thompson into the villain.
Mercer growled, pulling out a folder stuffed with every scrap of intel they'd scrambled to gather on Darius Thompson in the past 72 hours. We issue a statement about a dangerous military operative, possibly unhinged with PTSD, meddling in legitimate police work. We paint him as unstable, a violent threat waiting to snap. Tate nodded slowly, a spark of understanding flickering in his eyes as he caught on to the sinister plot. Make the public fear him instead of us, he said, his voice gaining a twisted enthusiasm. Exactly. Mercer said, his voice sharp with triumph. Then we lean on my contacts at the Chronicle to plant a story, a witch hunt against honest, hard-working cops, orchestrated by federal bureaucrats with a political axe to grind. Will that be enough? Wilkins asked skeptically, his voice trembling with doubt. Mercer's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing to slits. It's just the beginning. By tomorrow, Maya Thompson will regret ever calling her brother. Could Mercer's venomous scheme outmaneuver Darius's relentless pursuit of justice? Across town, Darius Thompson stood at the safe house window, his piercing gaze scanning the perimeter out of ingrained habit, though the peaceful afternoon light bathed the property in a deceptive calm. His instincts, honed by 15 years in Delta Force, screamed to stay vigilant. Danger often struck when the enemy seemed to retreat. Behind him, the living room, now a high-tech operations center, buzzed with focused intensity as his team worked tirelessly. Screens glowed with surveillance footage, financial records, and personnel files, each a piece of the puzzle to dismantle Mercer's corrupt empire. A digital map of Westbrook sprawled across one monitor, pinpointing key locations: the police precinct, courthouse, Judge Palmer's home, and businesses tangled in Mercer's web of deceit. Could Darius turn this quiet town into a battlefield to save his family? We've got something. Carter Reed called out, his voice cutting through the hum of activity as he looked up from his laptop, his eyes sharp with discovery. Financial transfers from an offshore account to a private security firm in Atlanta. 3 payments in the last 12 hours, totaling $500,000. Darius moved swiftly to Reed's side, his expression darkening as he peered at the screen. Mercer, he asked, his voice low but laced with urgency. The account traces back to shell companies we've already linked to him. Reed confirmed, his fingers flying across the keyboard.
The Firmes Phoenix Tactical.
Darius's jaw tightened, his eyes like flint. Mercenaries, he growled, the word heavy with menace. Lisa Guan looked up from her screen, her voice steady but grim. Phoenix Tacticals led by Eric Donovan, a former Army Ranger dishonorably discharged after civilian casualties in Afghanistan. Their guns for hire in war zones and for shady clients with deep pockets. How many operators? Darius pressed, his mind already calculating the threat. Based on the payment size, I'd estimate 6 to 8. Reed answered, his tone grave. How could Mercer stoop to hiring killers to save his skin? Darius nodded, his face etched with grim determination. Mercer's bringing in hired guns. He's desperate. Should we alert the FBI? Marcus Green asked, his voice tinged with concern. Not yet. Darius decided, his tone firm. Agent Wilson's been solid, but bureaucracy will bog things down. By the time they get approval for more resources, it'll be too late. He turned back to the map, his eyes tracing Westbrook's layout like a general planning an assault. Mercer knows we're protecting Maya and Elijah. He'll target them first, thinking they're our weak spot. He's not wrong. Reed observed quietly, his voice heavy with truth.
No.
Darius agreed, his voice a steel vow. Which is why we need to evacuate them now. Could he outmaneuver Mercer's deadly trap? Darius pulled out his phone and dialed Maya's number, his heart pounding with urgency. When she answered, he skipped pleasantries, his voice sharp and commanding.
Pack essential for you and Elia.
5 minutes.
We are moving. What is happening?
Maya asked, her voice instantly alert, fear creeping into her tone. Mercer's escalating. I'll explain when I get there, he said, ending the call with a snap, his mind racing. He turned to his team, his orders crisp. Reed, you and I will extract Maya and Elijah. Guan, keep monitoring communications. I want to know when these mercenaries hit town and where they're headed. Green, coordinate with Wilson. Tell him we've got credible intel on a threat, but keep it vague. As they sprang into action, Darius checked his sidearm, a reflex from countless missions, his hand steady despite the stakes. This wasn't a desert or jungle, this was American soil, his sister's hometown. But the danger felt as lethal as any combat op he'd led. Could he protect his family from Mercer's hired killers?
Darius.
Reed said quietly, his voice low but firm. If we engage these mercenaries, we follow rules of engagement. Non-lethal options first. Darius finished, his tone unyielding. But make no mistake, these men are coming to hurt my family. I won't let that happen. His determination left no room for doubt, his voice a vow carved in stone. Reed nodded, his trust in Darius absolute after years of facing death together. He knew the commander's discipline but also his relentless drive to protect those he loved.
Let's move.
Darius ordered, his voice a call to battle. Could they beat the clock to save Maya and Elijah? Maya Thompson moved through her small apartment with frantic speed, her heart racing as she grabbed essentials for herself and Elijah, her hands trembling with fear. After their release from custody, they'd returned home, craving a shred of normalcy after the precinct's horrors. Now, that choice felt dangerously naive, a mistake that could cost them everything. "Mom, what's going on?" Elijah asked, his voice laced with worry as he watched her pack, his young face etched with concern. "Your uncle needs us to go somewhere safer for a while." Maya explained, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. "Just grab some clothes and your schoolwork, baby." Elijah hesitated, his eyes wide with fear. Is it because of the police? Are they coming back? His question pierced her heart. How could she shield him from this terror? Maya stopped, facing her son, placing her hands on his shoulders, her touch firm but filled with love. "I promised I'd always be honest with you, right?" she said, her voice soft but resolute. Elijah nodded solemnly, his eyes searching hers for strength. "Your uncle thinks Sheriff Mercer might try to hurt us to get back at him. But," she added quickly, seeing fear flash across Elijah's face, "Darius won't let that happen. Neither will I." Elijah processed her words, then straightened his shoulders, a gesture so like Darius it made Maya's heart ache with pride and pain. "I'm not afraid," he said, though his voice wavered, a brave front masking his fear. Maya pulled him into a tight hug, her eyes stinging with tears. "It's okay to be scared, baby. Brave people feel fear too, they just don't let it stop them." Could she be brave enough for both of them? A sudden knock at the door froze them both, Maya's heart leaping into her throat. She checked her watch. Darius wasn't due for another 15 minutes. "Stay here," she whispered urgently, guiding Elijah toward the bathroom, her voice trembling.
Lock the door.
Once Elijah was hidden, Maya crept to the front door, her pulse thundering in her ears. "Who is it?" she called, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound calm. "Miss Thompson." A female voice replied, smooth and professional.
I'm Detective Sarah Miller-Weiss, the State Bureau of Investigation.
"I need to speak with you about the case against Sheriff Mercer." Maya hesitated, her instincts screaming danger. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in a crisp suit holding up a badge, but something about her stiff posture felt wrong, like a predator in disguise. "I'm not available right now." Maya called back, her voice firm but laced with fear. "Contact my lawyer." A tense pause followed, then the woman's voice hardened, cold and commanding. "Miss Thompson, this is a matter of public safety."
Open the door now.
Maya backed away, her hand fumbling for her phone to call Darius, her heart pounding so hard she could barely think. Before she could dial, a deafening crash shook the apartment as the door was kicked in, splintering wood flying everywhere. The detective stormed in first, followed by two men in tactical gear, their faces hidden by balaclavas, their movements swift and lethal. Maya spun to run, her legs pumping with desperate adrenaline, but one of the men moved with terrifying precision, grabbing her before she reached the hallway. She fought back, kicking and scratching, her self-defense training surprising her attacker for a fleeting moment. "Elijah, run!" she screamed, her voice raw with terror.
Fire escape.
As the bathroom door burst open and Elijah bolted toward the bedroom window, the woman aimed a taser at Maya and fired. Electricity surged through Maya's body, her muscles seizing as she collapsed to the floor, pain exploding in every nerve. Through the agony, she saw one of the men snatch Elijah as he scrambled for the window, his small frame struggling against the brute's grip.
No.
Maya gasped, her voice a desperate plea. Leave him alone. The woman loomed over her eyes cold and detached, her voice devoid of humanity.
Nothing personal, Miss Thompson. Just business.
She raised a syringe, and as the needle pierced Maya's skin, darkness swept over her like a suffocating tide, swallowing her consciousness. Her last thought was of Darius. He'd come, he always did, but would he be in time? Could he save them from this new nightmare? Darius knew something was wrong the instant he turned onto Maya's street, the eerie quiet of the block setting his nerves on edge. The usual bustle of pedestrians was gone, replaced by an unnatural stillness that screamed danger. He slowed the SUV, his eyes scanning for surveillance, threats, anything out of place, his Delta Force instincts in overdrive.
Something is off.
Reed said beside him, his voice low, mirroring Darius's unease. Darius tapped his earpiece, his voice sharp.
Guan, status report.
Lisa's voice crackled through, clear and urgent. Thermal imaging from the drone shows no movement in Maya's apartment, but there was activity about 20 minutes ago. 3 heat signatures entered, then left with 2 more. Ice flooded Darius's veins, his heart clenching with dread. They got to them first, he growled, his voice a mix of fury and fear. Could Mercer have struck so quickly? Darius floored the accelerator, closing the gap to Maya's building in seconds, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. As they pulled up, the splintered door frame of the main entrance loomed like a wound, confirming his fears. Stay alert, he ordered, drawing his sidearm as they exited the vehicle, his movements precise despite the rage boiling within. This could be an ambush. They moved with the seamless precision of soldiers who'd raided countless danger zones, covering angles, communicating with subtle gestures, their senses razor-sharp. Inside, they took the stairs, avoiding the elevator's vulnerability, and approached Maya's 3rd-floor apartment with weapons ready. The apartment door hung askew, its hinges broken, a silent scream of violence. Darius entered first, sweeping the main room with lethal focus while Reed covered the hallway, their movements a deadly dance honed by years of trust. Signs of a struggle screamed from every corner, overturned furniture, Maya's phone shattered on the floor, a small splash of blood staining the carpet, a sight that nearly broke Darius's iron control. Clear, he called after checking the bedroom, his voice tight with restrained fury. Clear. Reed echoed from the bathroom, his tone equally grim. Darius knelt by the bloodstain, his fingers brushing it gently, still tacky fresh. He forced down the rage threatening to consume him, channeling it into cold, tactical focus. They knew we were coming, he said, his voice a low growl. This was time to beat us here. Reed examined a discarded syringe near the couch, his face darkening. Sedative, most likely.
Professional job.
How could Mercer's mercenaries have struck so precisely? Darius activated his earpiece again, his voice urgent. Guan, track every vehicle that left this area in the last 30 minutes. Get me everything on Phoenix Tactical, associates, properties, safe houses. Already on it. Guan replied, her voice steady but tense. And Darius, the Chronicle just dropped an article questioning the federal investigation. They're painting Mercer as a victim of overreach and you as a potentially unstable military operative with a grudge. Darius's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. He's playing defense and offense at once, he observed, his voice icy. Swaying public opinion while taking hostages. Could he counter Mercer's cunning before it was too late? Reed's face was etched with grim determination, his eyes shadowed with worry as he leaned toward Darius in the tense silence of Maya's violated apartment. This is getting complicated fast, he said, his voice low and urgent. Maybe it's time to bring in more resources. Could they handle this escalating nightmare alone? Darius paused, his mind racing with the same methodical precision he'd honed in countless combat zones, weighing each option like a general on the eve of battle. Call Wilson, he ordered, his voice steady but laced with steel. Tell him Maya and Elijah have been abducted by what we believe are mercenaries hired by Mercer, but make it crystal clear, we're not standing down. As Reed nodded and made the call, Darius moved to the window, his gaze piercing the darkening city where his sister had carved out a life. Maya had chosen to stay in Westbrook, despite its deep-seated flaws, pouring her heart into serving its people as a nurse, raising Elijah to be strong and kind in a town that often spat on those virtues. And now, because of that choice, because a corrupt sheriff thought he was untouchable, she was in mortal danger. How could Darius let this stand? His phone buzzed, a sharp vibration that jolted him from his thoughts, and an incoming text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. His heart clenched as he opened it, an image of Maya and Elijah, unconscious, sprawled in what looked like a grim industrial setting, their faces pale under harsh light. Below, a chilling message: call off the investigation, or they die. Darius stared at the screen, his expression unreadable, but inside, a seismic shift roared to life, the disciplined Delta Force commander giving way to something raw primal, a protective fury that burned like wildfire. Mercer had crossed a line, one he'd soon regret with every fiber of his being. Could Darius save them before it was too late? Night had fallen over Westbrook, cloaking the town in a tense electric atmosphere that crackled with danger. Downtown streets near the police precinct were locked down, squad cars barricading major intersections, their red and blue lights pulsing like a warning heartbeat. Officers loyal to Mercer patrolled in pairs, their weapons gleaming under streetlights, a blatant show of force meant to cow the town into submission. Inside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, Maya Thompson stirred, her head throbbing, her mouth dry as sandpaper from the sedative that had stolen her consciousness. As her vision cleared, the grim reality hit her: cold concrete floors, rusted machinery looming like ghosts, high windows letting in slivers of moonlight that barely pierced the gloom. Her hands were bound to a metal chair, the ropes cutting cruelly into her wrists, each movement sending sharp pain through her arms. Where were they? What had Mercer done? Mom. Elijah's frightened voice pierced the haze, trembling but brave, pulling her heart back from the edge of panic. Maya turned, her breath catching as she saw her son tied to a chair just a few feet away, his face streaked with tears but his eyes blazing with a Thompson resilience that made her heart swell. "I'm here, baby," she assured him, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the fear clawing at her chest.
Are you hurt?
Elijah shook his head, his voice small but defiant. "They didn't hurt me, just tied me up when I tried to run." Maya felt a surge of pride through her terror, her boy, so brave despite the odds. "That's my strong boy," she whispered, her voice thick with love. Could they hold on until Darius found them?
Autushing. A cold mocking voice slittered from the shadow, sounding a chill down Maya's spine.
Sheriff Cole Mercer stepped into the pool of light cast by a single overhead lamp, his silhouette menacing. Out of uniform, he looked oddly ordinary, but the glint in his eyes was pure malice, more terrifying than ever.
"What do you want, Mercer?"
Maya demanded, her voice trembling but fierce, refusing to let him see her break. He circled them slowly, like a predator savoring its prey, his boots echoing ominously on the concrete. "Originally, just to teach you a lesson about respecting authority," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Now." He shrugged, his smile cruel.
"Now we want my life back. The life your brother is hell-bent on destroying."
How could he justify his reign of terror?
"You destroyed it yourself."
Maya shot back, her fear giving way to a blazing anger that burned in her chest.
"When you chose corruption."
When you decided to terrorize people instead of protecting them. Mercer's face darkened, his jaw clenching as her words struck a nerve. "You have no idea what it takes to keep order in a place like Westbrook," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Sometimes, lines get crossed for the greater good."
"Greater good."
Maya scoffed, her voice rising with righteous fury. "Is that what you tell yourself when you're planting evidence?
When you reporting bribe?"
What good were you serving when you had your deputies harass me in front of my son?" Her words hung in the air, a challenge he couldn't ignore. Could she keep him talking, buy time for Darius? Mercer didn't answer directly, his silence a crack in his armor. Instead, he pulled out his phone, holding it up to show Maya a photo of Darius, his face stern and unyielding. "Your brother, the big war hero," he taunted, his voice laced with venom. "Did you know what you were unleashing when you called him? Did you realize the forces you were stirring up?" "I knew exactly what I was doing," Maya said firmly, her eyes locked on his, her voice a defiant vow. "I called someone who believes in justice."
Mercer loged, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the cavern warehouse.
"Justice? There's no such thing. Only power, and those too weak to grab it." He pocketed his phone, his movements sharp with anger. "Your brother may be powerful in his world, but this is my town, and he's about to learn what happens to outsiders who meddle." Could Mercer's arrogance blind him to Darius's strength? He nodded to the shadows, and a woman emerged, the same one who'd posed as a detective at Maya's door, her cold eyes glinting with ruthless efficiency. Keep them secure. Mercer ordered, his voice sharp. I'll be back after I deal with their would-be rescuer. As he turned to leave, Maya's voice rang out, fierce and unyielding.
You're making a mistake, sheriff.
You have no idea what my brother's capable of. Mercer paused at the door, his silhouette framed in darkness, his voice a chilling whisper. Maybe not, but he doesn't know what I'm capable of either. With that ominous threat, he vanished into the gloom, leaving Maya's heart pounding. The woman checked their restraints, her hands rough, then took up position by the door, her hand resting casually on the holstered gun at her hip, a silent warning. Could Maya keep Elijah's hope alive in this terrifying limbo? Maya leaned toward Elijah, her voice a hushed vow, soft but fierce.
Don't worry, baby.
Uncle Darius will find us. Elijah nodded, his eyes wide but resolute, struggling to be brave. I know.
Thompson family never break a promise.
His words, so small yet so strong, warmed Maya's heart, a flicker of light in the darkness. Back at Maya's apartment, Darius had transformed the living room into a tactical command center, a hive of urgent activity. Screens glowed with satellite imagery, building layouts, and surveillance feeds, each a lifeline to finding his family. His team, now bolstered by Agent Wilson and a select group of FBI tactical specialists, worked with razor-sharp precision, their focus unbreakable. The warehouse district's the best bet for a hostage situation. Wilson said, pointing to an area on the digital map, his voice steady but tense. Isolated, multiple exit routes, tough to surveil. Could they pinpoint Mercer's lair in time? Agreed. Darius said, his voice a low growl of determination. Guan, what do we have on properties tied to Mercer or Phoenix Tactical? Lisa swiped through her tablet, her fingers flying with urgency. Mercer's brother-in-law owns 3 buildings in that area through a shell corporation. One, an old manufacturing plant, showed unusual electrical activity in the last 24 hours. Darius zoomed in on the target, his eyes narrowing. That's it. 3 stories, multiple access points, solid defensive position. My team can surround it in 30 minutes. Wilson offered, his voice brimming with readiness. Too obvious. Darius countered, his tone sharp.
Mercedes got lookout.
The second they spot FBI or police, Maya and Elijah are as good as dead. Could they outsmart Mercer's deadly trap? Reed studied the building schematics, his brow furrowed with focus. We need a 2-phase approach, a small infiltration team to locate and secure the hostages, then the main force to take down Mercer and his mercenaries. Darius nodded, his mind aligning with Reed's strategy. Reed, you and I lead the infiltration. Wilson, have your team ready to move on our signal. This isn't a military op in hostile territory. Wilson pointed out, his voice firm but cautious. We've got procedures for hostage situations. With all due respect, Agent. Darius replied, his eyes blazing with intensity, this is hostile territory. These aren't petty crooks, they're trained mercenaries with military backgrounds, led by a desperate man with nothing left to lose. Wilson hesitated, then nodded, his respect for Darius evident. You've got operational lead until the hostages are safe. Then we do it by the book. Agreed. Darius said, his voice a vow. He turned to his team, his words a rallying cry. We move in 1 hour. Everyone needs to know, Mercer's not just saving his skin, he's making an example of my family. Could they pull off this daring rescue? All the more reason to do this right. Wilson said quietly, his voice steady but grave. Darius checked his watch, his heart pounding but his resolve unshakable.
Let's gear up.
Sheriff Mercer paced the warehouse's upper floor, his boots echoing in the cavernous space as he watched Tate and Wilkins coordinate with the Phoenix tactical mercenaries, their movements precise and professional, setting up defensive positions with chilling efficiency. Thermal imaging's active, reported Eric Donovan, the mercenary leader, his voice calm but deadly. We'll have warning of any approach. Mercer nodded, trying to project confidence he no longer felt, his stomach churning as events spiraled beyond his control. What had started as a routine intimidation of a black motorist had exploded into a standoff with federal agents and a Delta Force commander. How had it come to this? What if this doesn't work? Tate asked, his voice trembling with nerves, his eyes darting to the shadows. What if we can't stop them? Then we've got a fallback. Mercer said grimly, his voice low and menacing. Evidence I've collected over the years, insurance you might say. Dirt on every judge, politician, and business leader in the county.
If he go down, they all go down.
Wilkins looked skeptical, his hands fidgeting. Will that be enough? Before Mercer could answer, Donovan approached with a tablet showing thermal imagery of the perimeter. Movement. 2 heat signatures approaching from the northeast, using the drainage channel for cover.
Mercedes lips curled into a teint, cruel smile.
Right on schedule.
Position, everyone.
Could he finally outwit Darius? As his men scrambled to their posts, Mercer descended to the main floor, where Maya and Elijah sat bound, their faces defiant despite their fear. Looks like your brother's playing hero, he taunted Maya, his voice dripping with malice. Pity he's walking into my trap. Maya met his gaze, her eyes blazing with unyielding strength. You still don't get who you're dealing with, do you? She shot back, her voice fierce. Mercer opened his mouth to retort when the lights went out, plunging the warehouse into pitch-black chaos. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but panic had already gripped his men, their shouts echoing in the dark. What happened? Mercer demanded into his radio, his voice tight with fear.
Power is cut.
Donovan's tense reply crackled through. Comms are jammed. The radio went silent, a chilling void. Above, glass shattered, followed by the sharp pop of flashbang grenades, blinding and disorienting. Mercer drew his weapon, his heart pounding as he realized his trap had been flipped. To your positions. They're coming from above, he roared, but the attack from the roof was a feint. As his men looked up, shadows moved across the main floor, swift, silent, lethal. 2 figures in tactical gear neutralized the guards near Maya and Elijah with surgical precision, using non-lethal takedowns that dropped them before they could sound an alarm. Darius reached Maya first, his knife flashing as he cut her restraints, his voice urgent but steady.
Are you hurt? No.
Maya whispered, her voice trembling with relief, tears welling in her eyes. But Mercer's up there with at least a dozen men. Darius helped her to her feet, his touch a lifeline. Stay low. We're getting you out first. Reed freed Elijah, his movements quick and calm, a silent promise of safety. But as they moved toward the exit, a spotlight blazed from above, pinning them in its harsh glare.
Commander Thompson. Mercedes' voice boomed, echoing through the cavernous space, dripping with desperate bravado.
Darius pushed Maya behind him, his eyes scanning the tactical situation in a heartbeat. Mercer stood on a catwalk 20 feet above, flanked by Tate and Wilkins, other armed men positioned like vultures around the upper level. It's over, Mercer. Darius called back, his voice steady and commanding. The building's surrounded by federal agents. Your mercenaries are being taken down as we speak. There's no escape. Mercer laughed, a jagged, desperate sound that betrayed his crumbling control. Maybe not for me, but I'll have the satisfaction of watching you die first. He raised his weapon, aiming at Darius with a snarl. Before he could fire, the warehouse doors burst open, and an FBI tactical team stormed in, led by Agent Wilson, their shouts deafening.
FBI. Drop your weapon.
Everyone on the ground now. Chaos erupted as Mercer's men realized they were outgunned. Some threw down their arms in surrender, others opened fire, igniting a deadly crossfire that lit up the warehouse like a war zone. Could Darius save his family amidst this madness? In the chaotic whirl of gunfire and shouting within the warehouse, Sheriff Cole Mercer's nerve broke, his face a mask of panic as he spun and bolted toward a rear exit, his deputies Tate and Wilkins scrambling after him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Darius Thompson's sharp eyes caught their desperate escape, his heart pounding with resolve. Reed, get Maya and Elijah out, he barked, his voice cutting through the din, a command born of years in combat. I'm going after Mercer. Without waiting for a reply, Darius surged through the firefight, his movements fluid and predatory, weaving between support columns for cover as bullets whizzed past, each step a testament to his lethal training. Years of battle-hardened experience guided him, Every motion precise, every decision split-second, his focus razor-sharp on the man who dared to threaten his family. Could he end Mercer's reign of terror once and for all? Darius reached the upper level just as Mercer and his lackeys vanished through an emergency exit, their footsteps clanging on the metal fire escape beyond. He pursued, bursting onto the narrow staircase leading to the roof, the cold night air hitting him like a slap. Mercer, halfway up, sensed the hunter behind him and wheeled around, his face twisted with fear and fury, firing wildly. Bullets ricocheted off the railings with sharp metallic pings, sparks flying in the dark. "This doesn't have to end like this," Darius called out, his voice calm and commanding despite the chaos, a beacon of reason in the storm. "Surrender now, and you'll face justice in a courtroom, not a body bag." Justice.
Mercer spat, the word accuse dripping with venom.
"There's no justice for men like me. Only winners and losers." He fired again, the shots forcing Darius to duck for cover, his heart steady but his resolve burning hotter than ever. How could Mercer cling to such delusion? When Darius peered up, Mercer had reached the roof, Tate and Wilkins trailing like shadows, their desperation palpable. Darius ascended the fire escape with controlled urgency, his boots silent on the metal, emerging onto the flat rooftop just in time to see the trio sprinting toward a waiting helicopter, its rotors roaring like a beast ready to devour them. "Stop!" Darius shouted, his voice booming over the deafening noise, cutting through the night. "Federal agents are all around you." Spotlights from FBI vehicles blazed to life, bathing the roof in harsh white light, bullhorns blaring commands to surrender. There was nowhere left to run, no escape from the net closing in. Could Mercer see his empire crumbling? Tate and Wilkins froze, their faces pale as they realized the futility of their flight, slowly raising their hands in surrender, their defiance shattered. But Mercer, his world collapsing like a house of cards, made one final reckless choice, his eyes wild with the desperate knowledge that it was over. He turned toward Darius, his weapon raised, his snarl a twisted mix of rage and despair. "This is your fault," he roared, his voice cracking with madness. "All of it." Darius stood his ground, unmoving, his own weapon untouched, his gaze steady and unyielding. "No, Sheriff," he said, his voice calm but resonant with truth.
"This is the consequence of your choice. Nothing more." For a fleeting moment, the two men locked eyes across the rooftop. The corrupt sheriff woundé terrorise la community and the warrior woundé comme tout in this règne, a clash of wills under the unforgiving glare of justice.
Then Mercer's finger tightened on the trigger, his last act of defiance. Could he drag Darius down with him? Before he could fire, sharp cracks rang out from FBI snipers perched on nearby buildings, their shots precise and final. Mercer jerked back, his weapon slipping from lifeless fingers as he crumpled to the rooftop, his reign of terror extinguished in an instant. Darius looked down at the man who'd caused so much pain, his heart heavy not with satisfaction but with a grim sense of closure. The precinct would fall, Mercer's corrupt system would be torn apart, but the scars he'd left on countless lives could never be erased. As FBI agents swarmed the roof, securing Tate and Wilkins in cuffs, their faces ashen with defeat, Darius turned away, his mission shifting to his family, to healing, to the love that anchored him. The battle was won, but the war against corruption and injustice would rage on long after this night. Could Darius find peace after such a storm? 3 months later, the Westbrook County Courthouse stood like a fortress under siege, its stone facade radiating tension as media vans clogged the streets outside, reporters jostling for soundbites while protesters and spectators crowded the steps. Some waved signs demanding justice for Mercer's victims, their voices a chorus of righteous anger. Others, mostly officers from nearby counties, stood in silent, misguided support of a law enforcement system under fire. Inside courtroom 3, Maya Thompson sat rigid in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened, her heart a mix of dread and determination. Beside her, Elijah fidgeted with his tie, his young face marked by maturity forced upon him too soon, a boy who'd seen too much. Darius sat on Elijah's other side, his military posture unwavering even in a civilian suit, his mere presence a shield around his family, a quiet promise of protection. Could they finally see justice served? "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed, commanding the room's attention as Judge Eleanor Winters swept in, her presence a beacon of impartiality. Unlike her predecessor, Judge Palmer, who'd recused himself after his ties to Mercer surfaced, Winters was handpicked for this high-profile case, her reputation for fairness and ironclad adherence to the law making her untouchable by threats or bribes. "Be seated," she ordered, adjusting her glasses as she scanned the documents before her gaze sharp and unyielding.
Case number 2024, CR 7851, United States versus Logan Tatten Bradford Wilkins. The Wardenier v. à Reckoning l'ont overdu.
Could the courtroom deliver the truth Maya had fought for? Maya's eyes flicked to the defense table, where Tate and Wilkins sat beside their lawyers, their dark suits unable to mask their diminished stature, stripped of the badges that once cloaked them in power. Tate's face held a stubborn defiance, his jaw set like stone, but Wilkins looked haunted, his eyes darting nervously around the room, as if expecting retribution to strike from any shadow. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Harmon stepped to the podium, his voice resonant with purpose. Your Honor, the government is ready to present evidence that these defendants systematically violated citizens' civil rights under color of law, falsified evidence, committed perjury, and conspired to obstruct justice. His words were a clarion call for accountability. Could they expose the full depth of Mercer's corruption? The defense will show that my clients were merely following departmental procedures and the direct orders of their superior. Officer, countered William Stanley, the silver-haired defense attorney, his polished confidence oozing from every syllable, a man accustomed to defending the indefensible. Judge Winters nodded, her expression unreadable. Very well. Opening statements. As Harmon began outlining the prosecution's case, Maya's mind hurtled back to that fateful night at the gas station. The officers' casual cruelty, their mocking smirks, the gut-wrenching helplessness as they tore her from Elijah's side. Her hands trembled at the memory, her heart aching with the pain of that moment. Elijah, sensing her distress, slipped his hand over hers, his touch a quiet anchor. "It's okay, Mom," he whispered, his voice soft but wise beyond his 13 years. "We're winning." Maya squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude for his strength. How could her boy be so brave after all they'd endured? Harmon's opening statement painted a devastating picture, not just of Maya's ordeal but of a years-long pattern of abuse. Names and dates poured forth like a litany of suffering. Dozens of black citizens wrongfully arrested, evidence planted, lives shattered by false charges. The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as he detailed how Tate and Wilkins had been Mercer's chief enforcers, architects of a system designed to terrorize and dominate. When Stanley rose, his strategy was painfully clear, his voice smooth but manipulative. "My clients were pawns," he argued, gesturing toward Tate and Wilkins with feigned sympathy. "Subordinate officers trapped under the thumb of a corrupt sheriff who's no longer here to answer for his crimes." Could he really shift the blame so shamelessly? Maya felt Darius stiffen beside her, his quiet fury palpable as Stanley tried to pin everything on the dead Mercer, a transparent, predictable dodge. Sheriff Mercer created a culture of fear in the department. Stanley continued, his tone dripping with false sincerity. Officers who dared question his methods were relegated to grueling shifts, passed over for promotions, or worse. My clients were victims of this corrupt system, not its masterminds. Judge Winters cut in, her voice sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Stanley, the court recognizes chain-of-command dynamics, but let's be clear, following orders hasn't been a valid defense for criminal acts since Nuremberg." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the bailiff's stern glare, a reminder of the gravity of this moment. Could the judge's clarity pave the way for justice? The trial's first week was a relentless exposé of corruption, each testimony a hammer blow to Mercer's legacy. Former inmates took the stand, their voices trembling as they recounted false arrests and planted evidence, their lives appended by the precinct's malice. Business owners spoke of protection rackets, forced to pay hush money to avoid ruin, their fear palpable. A forensic accountant meticulously traced illicit funds from drug traffickers through shell companies to Mercer's personal accounts, his numbers a damning roadmap of greed. On the 8th day, Maya was called to testify, her heart pounding as she walked to the stand, but a strange calm settled over her, the fear from that gas station night replaced by a steely resolve to speak her truth. Could her voice spark change? Harmon guided her gently through her story, the arrest, the fabricated charges, the threats against Elijah, the brutal abuse she endured in custody. Her voice remained steady, her eyes occasionally locking with Tate and Wilkins across the courtroom, their gazes faltering under her unyielding strength. "Did either defendant ever show concern for how you were treated?" Harmon asked, his voice probing but kind.
"No."
Maya answered firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. They seemed to enjoy it. When Stanley rose for cross-examination, his approach was aggressive, his voice sharp with intent to rattle her. "Miss Thompson, isn't it true your brother's a military operative who declared war on the Westbrook Police Department after your arrest?" he pressed, his eyes narrowing.
Objection.
Harmon shot up, his voice booming.
Relevance.
"Goes to bias and potential motive to exaggerate, Your Honor." Stanley argued, his tone slick. "I'll allow it." Judge Winters ruled, her voice firm. "The witness will answer." Maya straightened, her shoulders squared, her voice calm but fierce. "My brother came to help me after I was wrongfully arrested and abused by these officers. He worked with federal authorities to expose corruption that's been hurting Westbrook for years. But he didn't follow proper channels, did he?" Stanley pushed, his voice dripping with accusation. "He used military tactics against civilian law enforcement. He used his training to protect me and my son when we were kidnapped by mercenaries hired by Sheriff Mercer." Maya corrected, her voice unshakable, her truth a beacon in the courtroom. Could Stanley break her resolve? Stanley shifted tactics, his voice softening but no less cunning. "Miss Thompson, before your arrest, had you ever had run-ins with Westbrook law enforcement?" "Only professional ones," she replied, her tone steady. "As a nurse at Memorial, I sometimes worked with officers when patients came in from accidents or violent incidents. So you had no personal reason to think officers would target you, correct?" Stanley asked, his eyes probing for weakness. Maya paused, her mind clear. "No personal reason, but as a black woman in Westbrook, I knew the department's reputation. Many in our community faced the same treatment." Stanley's face hardened, his voice sharp. "So you're claiming racial motivation based on community rumors?"
Objection.
Harmon interjected, his voice fierce. "Mischaracterizes the testimony." Sustained. Winters ruled, her gaze piercing.
Stanley précède on relentle.
"Miss Thompson, isn't it possible that, in the dark at that late hour, the officers genuinely believed your vehicle matched a stolen car's description?" Maya met his stare, her voice steady as steel.
No.
"My car's a 2015 Honda Civic. They claimed they were looking for a stolen vehicle but never specified what kind. They refused to check my registration, and when Deputy Tate searched me, he whispered, 'You people never learn.' That made their intentions clear." Stanley's cross-examination dragged on for hours, probing for cracks in her story, suggesting she'd embellished for the county lawsuit, but Maya stood firm, her testimony a rock of authenticity even the slickest lawyer couldn't erode. Could her truth sway the court? Stepping down from the stand, Maya felt a weight lift, her shoulders lighter, her heart buoyed by the power of her voice. No matter the verdict, she'd spoken her truth before the court and community. No one could steal that from her. The next day brought the trial's most explosive testimony yet, from Officer Brad Wilkins himself. In a deal for leniency, Wilkins agreed to testify against Tate, spilling the precinct's darkest secrets. As he took the stand, avoiding Tate's furious glare, the courtroom leaned forward, breathless, sensing years of buried confessions about to erupt. Could Wilkins's betrayal seal Tate's fate? The courtroom air crackled with tension as Assistant U.S. Attorney James Harmon faced Officer Brad Wilkins on the stand, his voice steady but piercing, ready to unearth the festering corruption that had poisoned Westbrook for years.
Officer Wilkins.
Harmon began, his tone commanding the room's attention. Was there a policy or practice in the Westbrook Police Department dictating how officers should interact with black citizens during traffic stops or other encounters? Wilkins shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting nervously, his hands fidgeting as if trying to escape the truth. "Not officially written down," he mumbled, his voice low and uneasy. "But Sheriff Mercer made it crystal clear, he wanted us to keep certain neighborhoods in check. That meant pulling over black drivers for minor stuff, or no reason at all, searching their cars, running their names for warrants." Harmon leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "And if no evidence of wrongdoing was found?" Wilkins stared at his hands, his face pale, his voice barely audible, as if the words burned his throat. "Sometimes we'd find something anyway."
You mean you des plans évidence.
Harmon pressed, his voice sharp as a blade.
Yeah.
Wilkins admitted, his whisper a confession that shattered the silence, his shame hanging heavy in the air. "We kept drop guns and bags of drugs in our cruisers just for that." A collective gasp erupted from the gallery, a wave of shock and outrage that Judge Eleanor Winters quelled with a stern call for order, her gavel slamming like a thunderclap. How could such brazen corruption thrive unchecked for so long? Harmon pressed on, his voice a relentless tide, pulling the truth from Wilkins's reluctant lips. Was this vile practice used in the arrest of Maya Thompson? He asked, his eyes boring into the officer's soul.
Yes.
Wilkins confirmed, his voice breaking under the weight of his guilt. The drugs found in her wallet? We planted them. Her car was never suspected of being stolen. That was just an excuse to stop her. Why was Miss Thompson targeted that night? Harmon demanded, his voice rising with righteous fury. Wilkins finally looked up, his eyes haunted, his words a devastating blow. Sheriff Mercer had a monthly quota, a set number of arrests from certain neighborhoods. We were behind that month. Maya Thompson was just convenient. The casual cruelty of his statement hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, its simplicity gut-wrenching. Maya wasn't targeted for any crime. She was simply a black woman in the wrong place at the wrong time, reduced to a statistic to meet a twisted quota. How could such heartless injustice be so coldly calculated? As Wilkins spilled more secrets, detailing case after case where evidence was planted, confessions coerced, and witnesses intimidated, the full horror of the department's corruption unfurled like a nightmare laid bare. Years of systematic abuse, justified as maintaining order, had instead served to terrorize an entire community, crushing lives under the weight of lies. Tate's attorney, William Stanley, scrambled to paint Wilkins as a desperate liar grasping for leniency, but the damage was irreparable. Too many details dovetailed with other testimonies. Too many witnesses had corroborated the pattern of brutality and deceit. Could Stanley's flimsy defense hold against this avalanche of truth? In a frantic bid to salvage his case, Stanley called character witnesses, fellow officers who vouched for Tate's so-called professionalism and community members who, under pressure, praised the order the department had enforced. But their words rang hollow, empty echoes against the mountain of evidence and raw, first-hand accounts of abuse that filled the courtroom. On the trial's final day, as closing arguments loomed, Maya sat with Darius and Elijah, her heart a turbulent sea of hope and dread, watching as Tate took the stand in his own defense. Unlike Wilkins, whose guilt had haunted his every word, Tate remained defiantly unapologetic, his chin jutting out, his eyes cold and unyielding. I served this community for 15 years, he declared, his voice booming with false pride. I put my life on the line every day to keep order in neighborhoods where cops weren't welcome. Sometimes, tough calls had to be made. Could he really believe his own lies? Harmon's cross-examination was surgical, his questions slicing through Tate's bravado like a scalpel. Officer Tate, he began, his voice icy and precise. Would you call fabricating evidence against an innocent mother a tough call? Tate's jaw tightened, but he clung to his script, his voice stubborn. I acted per department procedure. Was physically assaulting a handcuffed woman also procedure?
Harmon précède, holding up photo of Maya Esbruise, the stark purple marks a silent scream of truth.
Tate's facade cracked, his voice rising with a defensive edge. Look, some people only respect force. That's the reality of policing certain communities. Certain communities. Harmon repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. You mean black communities, right? I didn't say that. Tate backpedaled, his face flushing, but Harmon's voice was relentless, cold as steel. You didn't have to. Your actions have screamed it for years. How could Tate's arrogance blind him to his own guilt? As closing arguments wrapped up and the jury retired to deliberate, Maya found herself wrapped in an odd calm, a quiet strength that held her steady despite the storm of emotions within. Whatever the verdict, the truth had been laid bare. Westbrook would never be the same. It took the jury just 5 hours to return, an eternity compressed into agonizing minutes. As the courtroom reassembled, Maya gripped Elijah's hand so tightly her fingers ached, her heart pounding like a drum. Darius sat beside them, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, a silent guardian ready for any outcome. On the count of conspiracy against rights under color of law, how do you find? Judge Winters asked, her voice steady but resonant. The jury foreman stood, his voice firm and unwavering. We find the defendant Logan Tate guilty. On the count of falsification of evidence, how do you find? Guilty. As the verdicts rolled on, guilty on every count for both Tate and Wilkins, Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks, not of joy or triumph, but of release, a flood of pent-up pain washing away. The system that had nearly shattered her life was finally facing its reckoning. Could this be the dawn of justice? As the courtroom emptied, a swarm of reporters engulfed Maya and Darius on the courthouse steps, their microphones thrusting forward like spears, their voices a cacophony of questions. "Miss Thompson, how do you feel about the verdict?" one journalist shouted, her eyes hungry for a soundbite. Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself against the onslaught, her voice clear and resolute. "This isn't just about me," she declared, her words ringing with conviction. "It's about everyone who suffered under a corrupt system and never saw justice. Today's a first step, but there's so much more to do." Cameras flashed, capturing her strength, while Elijah stood tall beside her, his young face solemn but glowing with hope, and Darius, ever vigilant, watched over them like a sentinel, the warrior who'd fought a battle unlike any he'd trained for, driven by an unyielding love for his family. Could their courage inspire a community to rise? Spring ushered in renewal to Westbrook, its cherry blossoms painting the streets in delicate pink, their petals carpeting sidewalks where protesters had marched through the bitter winter, demanding systemic change with unyielding voices. The morning air hummed with the promise of transformation, not just of seasons but of a community yearning to heal. Maya Thompson stood on the steps of the newly renovated community center, her heart fluttering with nerves as she watched volunteers bustle about, setting up for the day's monumental event. 6 months had passed since the trial, and Westbrook was slowly mending, stitching together the wounds left by decades of corruption. "Nervous?" Denise Williams asked, appearing at Maya's side with a clipboard, her warm smile a steady anchor. Maya managed a small laugh, her voice soft but honest. "I never dreamed I'd be here doing this."
"You're right where you belong,"
Denise assured her, squeezing her arm with a fierceness that spoke of unwavering support. How could one woman's strength mean so much? Inside the main hall, rows of chairs faced a small stage where a podium awaited, its presence a quiet call to action. Posters adorned the walls, vibrant with messages of citizens' rights, law enforcement accountability, and community resources, each a beacon of hope for a better future. At a table near the entrance, volunteers handed out informational packets and signed up attendees for future workshops, their energy infectious. This was the official launch of the Thompson Justice Initiative, a foundation Maya had birthed from the ashes of her ordeal, funded by part of the settlement from her lawsuit against Westbrook County. Its mission was bold: to support victims of police misconduct, push for policy reforms, and rebuild trust between law enforcement and the community, a dream to heal a fractured town. Could it truly spark lasting change? Elijah emerged from a side room, carefully balancing a stack of programs, his 14-year-old frame taller now, his features sharpening from boy to young man. The trauma of their ordeal had left its mark, etching lines of resilience into his young face, but it had also ignited a fierce passion for justice and activism that made Maya's heart swell with pride. "Mom, the new police chief's here," he said, nodding toward the entrance, his eyes bright with excitement. Maya turned to see Chief Alicia Foster striding in with several officers, her presence commanding yet warm. Brought in from outside to rebuild the department after the federal probe ousted over 20 officers, Foster's appointment as Westbrook's first female and first black chief was a powerful symbol of the change sweeping through the county. Could she help mend the broken trust?
"Chief Foster."
Maya greeted, extending her hand, her voice warm but tinged with cautious hope.
"Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it."
Foster replied, her smile genuine, her eyes reflecting a commitment to reform. "Your foundation's work is exactly what this community needs to heal." Their relationship had begun warily. Maya's scars from the precinct ran deep, but Foster's sincere efforts to acknowledge past wrongs and implement reforms, from body cameras to civilian oversight and de-escalation training, had built a fragile bridge of trust. Could this partnership reshape Westbrook's future? As the hall filled with community members, local officials, and media, their voices a vibrant hum of anticipation, Maya slipped to a quiet corner to review her speech, her fingers tracing the carefully crafted words. Each sentence balanced pain and hope, a delicate dance to honor the past while forging a new path. A familiar presence loomed beside her, Darius, impeccable in a dark suit that couldn't hide his military bearing, his eyes soft with pride. "You're gonna shine," he said simply, his voice a quiet vow of support. Maya looked up, her throat tightening with emotion. After the trial, Darius had lingered in Westbrook longer than planned, fortifying the foundation's security and standing as a silent guardian for her and Elijah as they rebuilt their lives. But tomorrow, He'd returned to his classified world, a warrior called.
Back to duty.
Could she let him go after all he'd done? I couldn't have done this without you, she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude.
Darius shook his head, a rare smile breaking through.
You'd have found a way. Thompson family always does. Will you at least think about my offer? Maya pressed, her eyes pleading. The Foundation needs your expertise, permanently.
A ghost of a smile touched his lips.
My skills are for neutralizing threats, not building bridges. I disagree. Maya countered, her voice fierce with conviction. You're a master at both. Before he could reply, Denise signaled it was time, her nod a gentle push toward the stage. Maya took a deep breath, her heart pounding but her resolve unbreakable, and stepped forward, ready to face her moment. Could her words ignite a movement? The audience hushed as Maya took the podium, their faces, some familiar, others strangers, turned toward her, united by a shared hunger for change. In the front row sat her anchors, Elijah, his eyes gleaming with pride, Denise, nodding encouragement, Janine and other former inmates who testified, their strength a testament to survival, Agent Wilson, representing the federal allies who toppled Mercer's empire, and Darius, standing at the back, ever watchful but present, a silent pillar of support. 6 months ago. Maya began, her voice clear and steady, resonating with power. I stood in a courtroom and told my story. Today, I stand before you not just as a survivor of a broken system, but as someone determined to fix it. Her words echoed, a call to arms for justice. Could she inspire a community to rise? As she spoke of the Foundation's initiatives, legal aid for victims, educational programs, policy advocacy, Maya saw tears glisten in some eyes, resolute nods from others, a shared resolve born from the pain of Mercer's reign. The collective suffering had forged an unexpected unity across racial and social divides, a community ready to heal. The Thompson Justice Initiative isn't about revenge or punishment, she continued, her voice swelling with passion. It's about transformation. About building a community where no mother fears for her child during a routine stop, where no officer's forced to choose between conscience and career, where justice means justice for all.
Her vision painted a future worth fighting for.
Could they make it real? After her speech, as attendees mingled and explored information booths, a young patrol officer approached Maya, his face earnest but nervous, his badge gleaming under the lights. She recognized him as one of Chief Foster's new recruits, a fresh face in a department striving for redemption. Miss Thompson, he said hesitantly, his voice trembling with sincerity. I just wanted to say what happened to you. It's why I became an officer. To make sure that never happens again. Maya studied him, seeing the weight of his badge, the struggle to live up to its promise. What's your name, officer? She asked, her voice warm.
Jenkins, Mahem. Michael Jenkins.
Officer Jenkins, your being here, saying this, gives me hope, she said, her smile genuine. This work needs us all, community and law enforcement together. Could new voices like his rebuild trust? As the event wound down, Maya found Elijah deep in animated talk with Agent Wilson, his eyes alight with hero worship for the FBI agent who'd helped free them from the warehouse. Mom. Elijah called excitedly as she neared, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Agent Wilson says I could apply for the FBI internship program when I'm in college. Maya raised an eyebrow at Wilson, who shrugged with a sheepish grin. He's got a sharp mind. Wilson said, his voice warm. And he knows why justice matters. We need more like him in federal law enforcement. Elijah's questions about the FBI poured out, his passion infectious, and Maya drifted outside for a moment of quiet, the cool evening air a soothing balm after the crowded hall. Could her son's dreams rise from their pain? Darius was already there, gazing at the city skyline, his silhouette a quiet strength against the dusk. Successful launch, he commented, his voice soft but proud. You should be proud. I am. Maya agreed, her heart full but her mind restless. But there's still so much to do. There always is. Darius said, his tone wise. That's why the fight never stops. They stood in companionable silence, the city's distant hum washing over them like a lullaby. I've been thinking about your offer. Darius said finally, his voice thoughtful. About staying with the Foundation. I've arranged a 6-month leave, maybe renewable. My team can manage without me for a bit. Joy bloomed in Maya's chest, her eyes shining with hope. Elijah will be thrilled. He looks up to you so much.
The feeling is mutual.
Darius replied, his voice warm. That kid's braver than some soldiers I've led. Could Darius's presence fuel their mission? He gets that from his mom. Denise's voice chimed from behind, her knowing smile lighting up the moment. The center's closing, but folks are heading to Ruby's diner to keep talking. You two should join. As they returned to collect Elijah, Maya's mind traced their journey, from a terrifying night at a gas station to launching a foundation that could change lives, from victims of a corrupt system to architects of its rebirth. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, systemic change never was. Old biases and resistance would linger, but seeing the diverse crowd today, activists, reformed officers, everyday citizens united for a better Westbrook, Maya felt a surge of hope she hadn't dared dream possible. Could they build a future free of fear? At Ruby's diner, in a crowded booth buzzing with plans for the future, Elijah leaned close to his mother, his voice quiet but earnest. We did it, didn't we? He asked, his eyes bright with conviction.
We made things better.
Maya looked at her son, no longer the scared boy who'd watched her be dragged away, but a young man with purpose, forged in the fire of their ordeal. She thought of all they'd endured, all they'd learned, all they'd achieved together. We've started, she corrected gently, her voice warm with love. And that's the most important part. Across the table, Darius caught her eye, raising his coffee cup in a subtle toast, his gaze steady with pride. Maya smiled, lifting her cup to meet his. The Thompson siblings, healer and warrior, united in a battle neither had foreseen, but one they'd fought with fierce devotion. Could their bond reshape a community's soul? Surrounded by allies old and new, Maya knew the challenges ahead would test them, but they'd face them as they'd faced Mercer's corrupt precinct, together, with unwavering resolve and a belief that justice was worth every sacrifice. Not just for themselves, but for all who'd suffered in silence, for those yet to come, for a future where a late-night gas station stop wouldn't shatter lives. A future they'd build, one determined step at a time. What would you do if the system meant to protect you became your greatest enemy? Maya and Darius's saga screams that justice demands courage and sacrifice, often from the least expected. If their tale of accountability stirred your soul, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge our grasp of justice, family, and the raw power of standing against corruption. Could you rise like the Thompsons to fight for what's right?